of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. It's not very glorious, I have to say, out there. It's absolutely tipping it down with rain. So if you are thinking about going out, you might wish to take an umbrella, especially if you're in the southeast of England. Obviously, that's where I am. That's where I know what the weather's doing. If it's raining where you are, it's quite nasty. It's quite horrible. But it is, of course, April. So April showers are to be expected. Theo Usherwood's here with us. We're going to be looking... Very good morning to you, Theo. We're going to be looking at all the papers this morning. And I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Keir Starmer is still not out of the woods because on the front page of the Daily Mail, he's being told by Kemi Badenoch, and this was quite a good performance from her yesterday, the Prime Minister owes an apology to so many women, because what happened yesterday was we knew just before we left you at 10 o'clock yesterday morning that Starmer had been forced to say something when he was out and about in a school talking about free breakfast clubs, that he was, of course, eventually asked about what he thought about the Supreme Court ruling last week, and he finally came out and said, oh, it was a great moment of clarity for us because we've now got clarity on what a woman is. And ever since then, he's been absolutely and utterly ridiculed and pummeled by everybody with any common sense whatsoever, who said, why did he need to be told by the Supreme Court what a woman was? And the big question for me, ladies and gentlemen, this morning is that Keir Starmer goes on and on about how good of a lawyer he is, how he was the chief prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service, but he basically got the law wrong, because in 2023, he said a trans woman is a woman, and it's not just my opinion, it's the law. That's what he said, and he was wrong. So he got the law wrong. He, as a lawyer, misinterpreted the law. He got it wrong. I can't tell you how many more times I'm going to say that through the course of the show today, here until 10 o'clock. Keir Starmer is not a very good lawyer. He's certainly not a very good Prime Minister, and he doesn't even have the backbone to turn up in Parliament yesterday afternoon to make the statement that the government then provided. He left it to Bridget Phillipson, who apparently is not only the Education Secretary, but she's also the Minister for Equality. And she was absolutely and utterly pilloried from pillar to post by Kemi Badenoch, who I think had one of her best days in Parliament. We'll do all of that. We'll talk about all of that. There's lots of other stories to be done as well, because Rosie Duffield herself is actually writing in the Daily Mail, in which she says she very much doubts that she'll get the apology that she's asked for. Prime Minister also says in The Sun this morning that he wants to reclaim the flag, because it is, of course, St George's Day. Unfortunately for him, even The Sun don't think it's that big of a story. They put it on page 2 at the top. But there we are. He's suddenly rediscovering women, and he's rediscovering the English national flag. What's going on? What next? Is he going to sort of dress up as a pearly king and wander about the East End going, all right, mate, any old iron? You know what I'm saying. Also, we're going to talk about the BBC. Gary Lineker's whining and moaning all over the place on the BBC, of course, interviewed by the BBC about why the BBC wanted to get rid of him. I mean, how much self-indulgence do you want to get into one particular programme? Plus, we'll be talking about why we love dogs. Apparently it's because we can control them and they do what we want. If only people would do the same thing. This is Morning Glory. It's 6 minutes past 6. Let's get it on. Oh, there's another good story about Ed Miliband as well. This is on the front page of the Times, where apparently slave labour setback to Miliband's green goals is what the headline says. Solar panels linked to Chinese slave labour will not be used by Britain's state-owned energy company after a government climb down that could threaten its net zero ambitions. Hurrah! Theo, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you.
I mean, I get very exercised and quite sort of animated by this whole Starmer women's debate because, I mean, we've been doing I said it on Wednesday of last week. As soon as that statement was handed down by the Supreme Court, I said, now Starmer has to come out and say, I got it wrong.
Yes.
He needs to come out and make a statement. Instead of which he waited not 1 day, not 2 days, basically 6 days.
12 tweets, I think, on various other subjects. And then
suddenly he gets caught in the morning because he would have expected to be caught when he's doing the rounds on the breakfast clubs, free breakfast clubs for everyone, which nobody cares about. And he didn't even have the cojones, as I say, to present himself to Parliament to explain what the Labour government position was.
No, and he left it, of course, to Bridget Phillipson. I thought, and I was in the Commons chamber yesterday, actually, I thought Kemi Badenoch, she played a blinder.
She did.
Well. And she gave it the importance that this issue deserves by saying, actually, stand aside, Shadow Cabinet, I'm going to front this and I'm going to set out the Conservative position against Bridget Phillipson. Demanding, and this was, she wasn't the only prominent MP to do it, that Bridget Phillipson and the Labour Party apologises to Rosie Duffield. And in politics, we have short memories, Mike. People sort of forget.
Luckily.
No, you don't. You're like an elephant.
Yeah, I don't forget any of it.
You don't forget any of it. But I remember, because I was there at those Labour Party conferences, where Rosie Duffield couldn't attend.
Right.
She was having death threats, she was having threats against her safety,
and all the rest of it.
Security.
Yeah.
She wanted just to have... And she wasn't alone in the Labour Party. I remember interviewing Labour Party delegates who turned up and they were shouted down by trans activists in the great big hall when they dared to say what the Supreme Court said last Wednesday.
Yes.
They had the temerity to say exactly what the Supreme Court ruled last Wednesday. And the problem with Keir Starmer is he is a lawyer because he goes, well, the Equalities Act says, it has an interpretation of sex being legal sex, and he follows that, and then of course the law changes.
But it turns out he got that wrong.
He got it wrong, yes.
But the law hasn't changed. This is the thing. This is the same argument used by some people about COVID. Oh, well, when the facts change, I change my opinion. The facts haven't changed.
No.
The Supreme Court basically clarified what the situation was. Yes. I wouldn't have thought, if you're a decent lawyer,
no, that's what he was hiding behind. So he's saying the legal. He's saying within the Equality, the argument is within the Equality Act that there was an interpretation which turned out to be wrong. Yeah. That sex was that when they referred to sex, it was legal rather than biological. Right. The Supreme Court then came in and clarified it and said, no, that's rubbish. Yeah. Forget it. No, there's biological sex. Yeah. And now he's saying, well, as you say, the facts have changed. Yeah. And they
haven't because we've got the receipts, as people say. We've got him saying plenty of things that he now doesn't say. For example, that trans women are women. He now doesn't think they are. Yeah. That was the law at the time. He said it's not my opinion, it's the law that trans women are
March
women.
2022.
And it turns out that actually that was incorrect. And so what kind of a lawyer is he?
Well, he's
not a very good one, in my estimation.
Yes. Look, and the other thing is that actually any of your listeners, anybody tuning into your show today, right, would know you don't actually need the Supreme Court in this.
Of course you don't.
You don't
Everybody
need,
knows
you
that.
You don't need the most prominent judges in the land to make this decision.
But this is, again, what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the Southport situation where he hid behind the definition of terrorism and he pretended that we couldn't say that that scumbag, whose name I don't like to mention, who killed those 3 little girls, was a terrorist. He couldn't say it because it didn't fit the current legal definition of terrorism, which everybody also knows is a complete pile of absolute cobblers.
Yes, but this is... He uses the law to say, well, I'm only going to stick to what the interpretation is.
But he's now starting to become unstuck because that's not what politics is about.
No,
politics is about leadership.
Feeling, and it's about gut feeling. Yeah. And I was speaking to my wife about this. Yeah. Because I was saying, what do you think? Because I'm a bloke and my antenna might not be right on this, right? And just what... She's good at this stuff. She's really, really good at this stuff. Actually, she's a lawyer.
A good lawyer.
A good lawyer.
Yeah.
But do you know what she said to me? She said, what I want to know from Keir Starmer, when I watch Keir Starmer, right, I don't need you to kind of give me chapter and verse on, you know, what the law is. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
I want to know what your gut feeling is. I want to know, what do you think a woman is?
Yes.
You personally.
And he could never answer it.
And he could never answer
it. It's like that question where he gets asked about, you know, is it right to say that only a woman can have a cervix?
Yeah.
Or is it transphobic, I think Andrew Marr asked him the question. And his answer is, well, it shouldn't be said. And you go, oh, right, so what, now you want to police what people say? So you shouldn't say it because it's difficult. Let's have a look from the beginning of the day yesterday. This is Starmer talking in the morning about the clarity that we've now got.
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you don't think a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. So I think it's important that we see the judgment for what it is. It's a welcome step forward. It's real clarity in an area where we did need clarity. I'm pleased it's come about. We need to move and make sure that we now ensure that all guidance is in the right place according to that judgment.
What are your words for the trans community who are worried about what this could mean for them?
Well, look, I think it is important that we have clarity about the law. That's what the Supreme Court is there for. So obviously that's an important and welcome step, and we go forward from there.
Which is pretty much exactly what Rachel Reeves said 5 days earlier, that it's all about clarity. Well, it's not about clarity because nobody needed clarity. The only people that needed clarity were the idiots like him who thought that a woman could have a penis.
So,
what
was interesting in the briefing is that the spokesman, the Prime Minister's spokesman, I was listening in on it, said, so the Prime Minister's always said that a woman is
This is the other lie that they were giving out, wasn't it?
So Prime Minister's already said that a woman is an adult female. And indeed, he had said that in March 2022.
Yeah.
But inserted, of course, in addition, a trans woman is a woman, which is a fairly big thing.
Yeah.
And so by that logic, the meaning of the sentence.
But also by that logic, a trans woman is also an adult female, in his view.
So
that was what he was more or less saying.
Yeah, he could have actually gone further and said a woman is somebody who is biologically born a female.
Yeah,
that
he
would
could
be,
have said that.
But he
was frightened of saying that because he knew that would upset the trans maniacs and the activists in the party.
I don't use Twitter a huge amount now, but I did, or X, but I did go on. You might take some Schadenfreude from this, Mike. He's getting an absolute pasting from the left.
He gets the pasting all the time from everyone on Twitter. He literally can't do anything right.
The backlash he's getting it from all sides because, of course, you try to steer a course down the middle of the road, and everybody.
If you want to amuse yourself for any period of time during the day, if you went for a train or something like that, just look at all the comments underneath anything that Keir Starmer tweets. It's absolutely hilarious. Here's what he said before yesterday. Let's have a look at this.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right.
In 2021, you said that MP Rosie Duffield was wrong to say that only women have a cervix. In the next year, asked to define a woman in an interview in The Times, you said a woman is a female adult. In addition to that, trans women are women. Later that month, you said in an LBC phone-in, well, you just simply refused to answer the question of whether a woman can have a penis. And finally, in 2023, you said that for 99% of women, their gender is completely biological, and of course, they haven't got a penis.
So a woman can have a penis?
Nick, I'm not. I don't think we can conduct this debate with.
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No, it's just...
I mean, it's not a debate, is it? It's just not a debate.
No.
And now the Supreme Court have said it's not a debate. But he thinks it's a debate.
But it's worth just underscoring the politics behind this, right? Because the reason that he's in this complete tangle, Mike, is because he has to keep the trans lobby happy.
Yes. Why, though? Why does he feel that he has to do that?
The Labour Party... Whisper it quietly, say the quiet bit out loud, need votes.
Yes. Also, the Labour Party is riddled with people who hate Israel and who love trans rights. That's the bottom line. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know, that's the basic principle of the new Labour Party is riddled with those people. Okay,
I mean, it's top to bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, and he has to understand that is his base, and he can't get away from it. He used to say he'd cleaned up the Labour Party. Well, it doesn't look like it to me. Shameless trans law about turn, it says in the Telegraph. Keir Starmer has been accused of peddling a shameless work of fiction after the government claimed it had always supported single-sex spaces for biological women. Bridget Phillipson, the Women and Equalities Minister, told Parliament yesterday there is no change to announce. It's a barefaced lie. Let's have a look at what Bridget Phillipson said.
This government will continue as before, working to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, now with the added clarity of this ruling. And we will continue our wider work with commitment, with compassion, to protect all of those who need it, right across society. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a government that will support the rights of women and trans people, now and always.
Simply not true, is it?
Yeah.
Because they never did.
No, and it's also, of course, worth mentioning that it was part of the Labour Party policy offering that actually, and this is prior to 2023, that they were going to allow self-ID without a medical diagnosis.
Exactly.
So you could simply say, you know, I could come into your studio
say,
on Wednesday
today I'm a
as
woman.
Theo, and then on Thursday I could come in and say I'm Theodora.
Or Cleo, even. I prefer Cleo.
Cleo or Thea, or whatever. But that's perfectly possible. So I could go away. I could have a think to myself, well, I'm not feeling particularly comfortable, and I could say, well, I'm going to now self-ID as a woman.
Yeah, and the thing that I think a lot of people are finding quite distasteful about the trans lobby as it now is, calling for the death of people like J.K. Rowling, the shambolic and horrible posters that they were parading around with in London, and their obsession with toilets. I mean, that seems to me, it's a bit of a horrible subject for this early in the morning, but, you know, it's all about which toilet you go to. You know, and there were pictures coming in from Scotland the other day of these kind of trans activists standing outside toilets
really
and intimidating people. And J.K. Rowling, I think, put a tweet out saying, I don't want my daughter to have to run the gauntlet of these horrible, ghastly individuals in order just to use a toilet.
No,
you know, and it's shocking. It's awful. And he should be, and he hasn't done it because he was too cowardly to appear in Parliament yesterday. But he should absolutely decry it. He hasn't said anything yet about the two-tier policing on Saturday. The fact that these threats were being made in plain sight. You know, nobody was arrested. The police are looking for people, but they didn't arrest anybody on the day. And I said yesterday, what's the difference between holding up a banner that says the only good turf is a dead turf, and what Lucy Connolly was put in prison for?
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah, completely
there isn't
right.
any, is there? And he's got nothing to say about it. And so he's proving himself to be a man who hides behind the law, which he's clearly not very good at understanding.
Well, if you apply the case of Lucy Connolly and what happened on that poster or that placard, there isn't. I mean, the law's clear. I mean, they should have been arrested.
Yeah, absolutely right. And otherwise, you get accused of two-tier policing. Let's have a look at Kemi Badenoch. And what I would say one of her best days.
In 2021, the Prime Minister said it is not right to say only women have a cervix. In 2022, he said it is the law that trans women are women. In 2023, he said, and I quote, 99% of women don't have a penis. I know what a woman is, and I always have. Yeah. The people of this country know what a woman is. Yeah. We didn't need the Supreme Court to tell us that, but this government did. Yeah. A Labour government so desperate to jump on a bandwagon that they abandoned common sense, along with the SNP, who put rapists in women's prisons, and, of course, the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, Ed Davey hasn't had much to say on this, has he?
No, and well, the Liberal Democrats are in a similar position to Labour on this.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that, just your point, Mike, that you're making about actually stamping it out. If the Prime Minister had come out and actually said something about what happened in those protests, or
surely he should urge them to stop this kind of protest.
Or indeed, you know, standing up, somebody coming out, you know, i.e. Keir Starmer coming out and saying, you know, what happened to Rosie Duffy was wrong, and that actually she has now been proven to be right.
Yes.
That would go a huge...
Even if he admitted that he was wrong, that would be something. And why can he not come out and say, actually, this activity that we saw on Saturday, and which is now planned to be expanded across the country by the trans activists, is unacceptable behaviour. It is not free speech to threaten people. It is not free speech to basically to hold up posters and banners saying that J.K. Rowling should be burned as a witch, or that she should be killed, or that, you know, women should be punched in the face, or that people should have knives stuck in their eye. That was one, DIY lobotomy, if you don't like trans people. You know, these are violent images, violent threats. They should not be made, and I will come after them with the full extent of the law. Surely that's what he should say.
And stamp it out.
Yeah.
As he did.
Yeah, as he did with Southport.
Southport, yeah. And of course...
Otherwise, he's a coward and a man who will be accused forever of two-tier justice.
Yeah, and Rosie Duffield, who of course has suffered so much of this abuse, writing page 7 of the Mail, she says she doesn't expect to get an apology. She should have an apology.
She should, absolutely.
She should get an apology for the way she was treated. And what's important about this, Mike, is it would have a material effect in actually saying, you know, the Supreme Court's made its ruling, line in the sand, things have changed now, and this is the way that it's going to be.
Yes.
And if you don't like it, suck it up.
Yeah, exactly right. And if you threaten people, that will be considered to be a violent attack on democracy, and you will be prosecuted and convicted, as he said, to the full extent of the law. Why can't he say that?
And potentially go to prison.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, he never said potentially when he said
I'm not. But you would go. It's a fair point.
The same offences.
Yeah.
And I mean, let's look at what the BBC have done to cover it. Apparently, I don't know what they did last night, but last week Newsnight shied away from the story altogether. The piece in Sarah Vine's column this morning about how have I got news for you didn't seem to mention it. Didn't feel like there was any need to mention it. Page 15. Following Newsnight's decision to almost completely ignore last week's Supreme Court ruling on the definition of a woman, the BBC's comedy show Have We Got News For You failed to mention it at all.
It made international news.
Yeah.
This you know, people, you know...
But obviously the BBC doesn't think it's a story.
And I don't know why.
I know.
Well, maybe I do know why. Maybe we can't... You know, maybe because they don't
What
like the outcome.
What are they so frightened of?
They're frightened
What are they so frightened of? I find it astonishing that these people are supposed to be, you know, either comedians or impartial. I don't even care if they're not impartial, but even if you're not impartial, you still have to cover the biggest story of the week. Yeah. Without, how can you pretend it's not there? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's covering it up, and it's saying this isn't something. This is something we find too difficult to cover. I mean, it was. I was off last week from lots of other work that I did. I came in, of course, to see yourself.
Right.
But this was international news. You couldn't miss it.
No.
It was...
And it's a massive story, apart from anything else.
Story.
It defines Keir Starmer now for the rest of time, and I think it doesn't do him any services that are good, because it now defines him as a coward, it defines him as somebody who got the law wrong, and who's too shamefaced and arrogant to admit that he got it wrong.
Yeah, and he won't admit it, and I think it's going to be interesting. I think today's going to be quite bloody at PMQs, and you're quite right to say that Kemi Badenoch had put in a good performance yesterday, late in the chamber.
Yeah.
Actually, because the statement came so late after various...
I mean, it was after 6 practically, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting that, of course, John Healey had to do an update on Ukraine.
Oh, yeah. Of course
so important, which, of course, was the first...
Actually, we've got quite a funny... I don't know if we'll get it in time for the first hour, but it'll be quite a funny video to show you on Ukraine, and we'll bring you back to that. Simon from Durham says this: Mike, I don't know what the trans fanatics are whining on about. If they're caught short, just go to the toilet in a coffee shop or something when there's usually one bog, or use a disabled loo. Sorted. Exactly right. Good morning, Mike. I want a journalist to ask Starmer, what is a man, says Lynn in Norfolk, and why do journalists never ask Starmer tough questions? Now, that's a good point as well, because there is a certain coziness that people perceive between those in the lobby who are the professional sort of journalists who travel around with the Prime Minister. There is a certain kind of quid pro quo, isn't there, with journalists and the press team in Downing Street? Because if you fall out of favour, then you don't get to ask any more questions.
Or you don't get the briefing. It is not a perfect system. Yeah. I'd also point you to the way that yesterday was set up for Keir Starmer to give that statement to ITV West Country.
Right. So
it's like it's saying, I'm going to go all the way to this to talk about.
And that's planned, isn't it?
Of course it's set up.
Because I would have asked the question, I said this to Christian this morning, I would have asked the question, you know, did you get the law wrong when you said that trans women are women. It's not just my opinion, it's the law. Did you get the law wrong as a lawyer?
As a lawyer. But to be fair to the reporter who asked the question, she only got 2 questions on this particular issue.
Right.
So it's just like, all Keir Starmer has to do is just, all his team has to do is formulate a set of words, which he did.
And they usually elongate them so that you don't get to ask another question.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then you don't, whereas actually, you know, you want to face the tough questions. He should have come down and done a series of interviews, which he didn't want to.
He should have had a press conference. He should have had a press conference. He should have come out and he should have read the statement that Bridget Phillipson read.
Well, in front of the camera. In
front of the cameras in the White House, in Downing Street briefing room. That's what he should have done.
That would have been...
It's that big of a story. He was on the front page of the Daily Mail on Monday. They were calling for what we called for on last Wednesday. You know, the deafening silence. You need to now speak. You need to give us your view on this.
Yeah, and that would have been the straightforward thing to do.
Yeah.
And then to go into the House of Commons.
Yeah.
And to do it. But he didn't. You know, they obviously
didn't do either of those things. And I think it's shameful that the Prime Minister of this country, with the biggest story perhaps of the year, certainly politically, as far as I'm concerned. I know people think it's a bit trivial. It's not, because it gives you an idea, a window into his mind and into his soul, and it's pretty dark.
It's good. And the reason it's important, and I learnt this going way back, is what does it mean to the man and woman on the street? And it's going to have a profound impact, because you've got the EHRC completely redrawing its guidance.
Yes.
We heard from Lady Faulkner, the chair of the EHRC, an interview, by the way, which was described by ministers as appalling.
Yeah.
But she turned around last week and said, we're going to redraw all of our guidance. It's going to be updated in the summer.
Yeah.
And the NHS is going to have to do it. Dare I say,
and the
BBC is going to have to comply.
The NHS are threatening to try and find ways around it and use exemptions and all of that. We know that the Labour government itself has got ministers who don't agree with it, who want to try and find ways around it. So it's not finished yet.
The prison service is going to have to completely change the way it's going to do. So the whole way that all of the public services that we interact, indeed the impact will be on business.
Yeah, when you go to the doctors, everything.
Everything. It's going to have a profound impact on the way we live our lives.
Because we allowed the nonsense to go so far into the system. But we've run way over here, so we better stop for a minute. When we come back, though, I'm going to show you one of the funniest Starmer videos you've seen, complete with slow-mo and music. I mean, it really is quite pathetic, and it's about war. You know, he's trying to change the subject again. 6:28.
effectively a bunch of what the authorities call persons unknown, and I'm going to hazard a guess, it's only a guess, illegal immigrants, have set up a kind of shanty town underneath a bridge there by a roundabout, and We had read reports, my researcher and I, that they were effectively terrorising the neighbourhood, that they conduct daily shoplifting raids on local businesses, they are abusive and in fact downright dangerous.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 6:31. I'm Mike Graham. We are here, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. It is St George's Day. Theo Usherwood is here. We'll talk about Keir Starmer and St George's Day in a moment. He's in the Sun this morning saying we must wrench the flag from the hands of those who want to divide this nation. Does he mean the Muslim communities? I mean, he doesn't say. Let's get a voice note from Phil.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Nottingham. So, women are women and men are men, and Keir Starmer is
a plonker. Rodney! Of course he is. He doesn't appear to know what he is, actually. I mean, he talks about himself as a lawyer. He talks about himself as, you know, a leader. But he's neither of those things. Have a look at this. This is an extraordinary piece of video, which he put out yesterday about national security. It's apparently with the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
He's also worrying about the down this way.
A number of countries that are coming together, including obviously United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, many other countries here, coming together to do vital training with our Ukrainian friends and colleagues and allies. I leave here in a moment just as humbled as I did the first time, thinking about the training you're providing and the training that you're receiving and the really important task to our Ukrainian colleagues that you're going on to perform on behalf of your own country, but also on behalf of the values and freedoms that we hold dear. So it's a real privilege to be able to be here with you this morning.
Here they come. Walking in slow motion away from a military helicopter. I mean, what is that supposed to signify? Do you think he's in Top Gun or something? And that ridiculous helmet he's wearing.
I think that's the look they're going for, Mike.
I mean, and this, by the way, in the background of, one, it's St George's Day, but two, front page of the Times, hundreds of Special Forces veterans face being unjustly hounded over incidents that occurred decades ago in Northern Ireland. This is according to serving and former elite troops. They're basically going to change what was originally offered as a conditional amnesty to those suspected of crimes related to the Troubles, which were measures that were brought in by the last government aimed at protecting former soldiers. So they're basically taking all of that protection away. He's walking around there talking as if he's the, you know, the commander of the fleet and the head of the armed forces, and he's not even got the dignity and the grace to actually look after former SAS soldiers who are being accused of various crimes during the Troubles.
The SAS, of course, has always works at the very fringes, and of course they work in the fringes of what is permissible. They conduct operations to keep us all safe. Yeah. In our beds.
They sometimes have to kill people. Guess what?
And they act with incredible bravery and courage. Yeah. I had the good fortune actually to sit at a table at a dinner with various members of with some senior members of 22 Regiment. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. They're incredible people. They are. And they're incredibly brave. And if somebody wants to say, well, there needs to be an inquiry, blame the government. Blame the government at the time. Those are the people who ordered them to do it. Exactly. These are brave men who actually deserve to be able to enjoy their retirement in peace, having served their country in the most difficult and challenging of circumstances.
Exactly right.
And not have to be looking over their shoulder, worried that the next lot of politicians are going to stitch them up for something that they were ordered to do by the politicians.
Exactly right.
And it's not palatable what they have to do. It's not easy. It's not easy work. And you know they have to do. You know they kill people and they and they act in extreme environments, and these veterans need to be able to enjoy.
And having been given protection from these types of investigations,
and they need it.
They should have that protection for the rest of their lives. But the Labour government are going to take that away, and presumably we'll see people being prosecuted, which I think is shameful. For him to put out a video like that, pretending he's the friend of the military, when we all know that's not the case, just because he thinks it might get him a few votes in Europe, absolutely disgusting.
And of course, a lot of this ties into they're used as a bargaining chip. Let's face it. When it comes to agreements right across the board to say, well, actually, don't worry, we're going to go and prosecute these men, and we're going to bring justice as a way of showing that somehow we can claim the moral high ground. It's disgraceful.
It really is. Page 2 of The Sun today, let's reclaim our flag, says the Prime Minister, and this is, of course, St George's Day. He says the flag must be taken from those who want to sow division. He recalled the best of our country in 1996 when it came together for the Euros. I mean, is that the best he can come up with? He said, yet now we can see people trying to sow division in our communities, people taking the red and white of our flag with them as they throw bricks at businesses. That is what happened last year in the riots. I don't remember seeing particularly English flags being waved around in the riots, do you?
No.
I mean, I don't know where he's getting that from either. And we must fight it because it was the aftermath of the riots that showed what it means to be English.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I don't know what he means by that either, because, again, the words he wants to say are unspoken. Basically, Labour apparently wants to present itself as patriotic amid fears that reform will make huge strides in next week's local elections. Oh, I see. That's what it's about. He's trying to take the pride of Britain and England out of the hands of reform. That's what he really wants to say.
Yes, and he was speaking, of course, that Downing Street had an event last week to mark, so last night even, to mark St George's Day.
Yeah.
You're quite right. Of course, this is a page 2 of The Sun and his comments there. This was reform is going to make significant gains.
Oh, for sure.
But
he's got a sort of sickness, hasn't he? Because he spoke at a Downing Street event, and you're quite right to say, to mark England's National Day, attended by NHS staff, police officers and charity workers. I mean, does he think they're the people that build Britain? I mean, the NHS is in the toilet. It doesn't work. It's completely riddled with the wrong kind of people in management. And obviously some people will say, well, he can't be horrible to all people in the NHS. No, but the NHS as an operation is a failed operation. The police, completely useless in many ways now, and charity workers. I mean, that's not what Britain is. No. If it was down to them, we wouldn't have any money. Oh, well, we haven't got any money, have we?
No. And you might think that he might have invited businesses.
Yeah, people who actually employ people,
small businesses.
People who actually create wealth, people who actually pay taxes, and who, basically subsidise this government with all of their ridiculously stupid ideas.
And just in terms of the local elections that are coming up, okay, fine, most of the seats are Conservative-held seats and we're going to see reform into. But, in terms of Labour, there are a few indicators. We are going to get some indicators of just how badly Labour are doing at the moment. Should the results follow the polls that we've seen nationally. And I think when we return after these local elections, when Parliament returns after these local elections, Mike, I think it is going to be a wake-up call to many Labour MPs. Just look at it and suddenly go, look, we've got a challenge on our hands.
Well, and listen, what happened yesterday, we haven't got to it yet, in the IMF in Washington and Rachel Reeves' trip over there.
Domestic factors.
A really, really bad situation. You can't go around running around blaming Donald Trump. We've got to move on again. I'm sorry about this. Mike, in summary, says Brian in Wiltshire, trans people who are 0.5% of the population, supported by the Hamas-supporting activists, are getting the knickers in a twist over which toilet they can use. I'd say 95% of the population are only concerned that our politicians can't see this. Absolutely right. Mark in Norfolk says, Mike, please don't blame our football fans for the lack of patriotism. The fact is the left has undermined our national identity for 30 years. Everyone else comes first. Our achievements are covered up or denied, and supposedly we don't matter in the world stage until it's time for war, and then we're needed. Let's get a voice note from Phil. Oh, sorry, we've done that one. My apologies. It was so long ago, I've forgotten. 6:39.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Theo Usherwood's here with us at 6:41. We're going through the papers to see what's going on. One from Carolyn Shuren by Sea. Morning, Mike and Theo, and all your viewers and listeners. Happy St George's Day. Yeah, I must admit, I was quite surprised. I was in Oxford Street yesterday, which is not a place I go to very often, and they've actually got Union Jacks flying across the street. You know, three, and another three, and another three, and another three. It's the first time I've seen flags flying in London like that for a long time.
Yeah, it's always welcome to be seen. My street there, a lot of people are flying their England flags out of their window today.
Yeah, that's good.
And they've been doing so for a few days.
But let's not forget, it was, of course, what's her face, wasn't it? The old Lady Noogie, or whatever they call her.
Emily Thornberry.
Emily Thornberry, who was the one that had a go at people flying flags and called them all racists.
It was ahead of a by-election in
White van man.
2014.
Was a picture of her. She took a picture and she put it on Twitter of a white van with the St George's flag hanging out of the window. And made some derisory remark about it. So it was Labour that pushed this particular agenda that the St George's flag is somehow racist. Now he's trying to reclaim it because he's worried about reform.
Yeah.
Quite simple.
Yeah.
One man who's not worried about reform, but he's worried about his own reputation, is Gary Lineker. We played a very brief clip of his interview with Amal Rajan on a BBC, because only the BBC could do an interview with the BBC employee about the BBC trying to get rid of him. I mean, it's like so onanistic, it doesn't even make sense. But here he is talking about free speech.
And some people would say, Gary, just while you're working for the Beeb, just don't bang on about what you don't like with government policy. Just put a sock in it.
And the people that say that obviously are the people that do try and champion freedom of speech. But freedom of speech when it suits them.
Do you see this as a freedom of speech issue?
Of course it is. Why shouldn't I have an opinion on things? I'm a bloody footballer who's turned into a sports presenter.
Yeah, he's got a lot of opinions on things, but strangely enough, most of them seem to chime with the Labour government, and he's not quite as active about his opinions these days as he was when the Tories were in power.
The problem with, he says, why shouldn't I have an opinion? This is why he shouldn't have an opinion, OK? He built up his following, whether it be on X or through Match of the Day, he built that up on the back of the BBC.
Yes.
License fee.
Yeah, he was trained by the BBC.
That's where he got it from. He was a footballer, and that Match of the Day, his analysis about football gave him a huge platform.
Yeah.
Right? A massive
and
platform.
a big audience of people who knew who he was.
Who knew who he was.
Yeah.
And he then used that audience he then campaigned to that audience with his particular views to try and shape policy.
Yeah.
I have no objection if people want to campaign on particular issues, but it shouldn't be funded to get to their position. Shouldn't have been basically off the back of funding from the taxpayer. Right?
Yeah.
And he's license fee.
He's had nothing to say about the immigration policy of the Starmer government, which in many ways is not much different to the immigration policy of the previous Tory government. No. They're now talking about deporting people who have no right to be here. Yeah. He said nothing about that. When Suella Braverman said it, basically she was likened it to a Nazi from 1930s Germany, which he says he doesn't regret saying
because he thinks it was accurate. It wasn't accurate. So it's like me going on.
I'm just looking through his feed now. It's mostly about football. It's mostly about promoting his podcast.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there about the horrible right-wing Labour government, which is now deporting these poor innocent people.
Anything on disability benefits?
A couple of people. No, nothing on that. No. A couple of people that he used to put up in his house. I mean, I wonder how they're feeling about that. Yeah. About being deported from this country.
No, did he?
Doesn't say anything about whether a woman is with a penis or not. Nothing to say about that.
Any objections on the rise in national insurance contributions?
Hasn't seen no, nothing on that. No. Nothing on that, and he's got nothing about the winter fuel allowance being taken away from pensioners either.
No.
Or the stripping away of people's disability benefits, as you said.
And he said, of course, that he's compared, Suella Braverman's asylum policy to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It's nothing like if you go and he said, oh well, that was accurate.
Yeah,
it wasn't accurate.
Well, apparently, he doesn't mind people being moved to a third country under Labour.
No,
that's fine. But it's just under the Tories that it was obviously horrible. Let's talk about Keir Starmer again. Apparently he wants to give away fishing rights once more to Brussels, because in order to form some kind of alliance in defence, they're asking, the French in particular, are asking for, you know, more concessions and more fishing rights. And it looks like he's going to give them, but he's been warned in the Daily Mail page 2 today against it.
But what was quite amusing is this story first emerged a couple of weeks ago when the Europeans turned around. This is the coalition of the willing, by the way, our closest allies in the defence of Ukraine. And they turned around and said, well, we've got this, there's this European fund of £153 billion, which could be spent on improving defence. But because we're not part of the European Union, our firms based in this country can't access that. So they can't develop, build, produce armaments to defend Ukraine from that pot of 153 billion, I guess, euros, because we're not part of the European Union. And there was and if we wanted to, and if we want our firms to be able to access that money, then the price was that, well, we have to negotiate when it comes to fishing rights. And the briefing from Number 10, up in arms. No, this is outrageous. We're at a point of crisis and a point of fork in the future of Europe's a future of Europe. How can the Europeans do this? How can this is, we shouldn't be paying. The narrative was, we shouldn't be playing petty games from the Brexit years. We've got to seize the moment and make sure that we get everything. Europe has everything that it needs to defend itself against Russian aggression, because we can't waste time. 2 weeks forward. There you go.
Absolutely. I mean, it is ridiculous. Again, shows you just exactly what the Starmer government is all about. It's about a soundbite of the moment, which is immediately forgotten about, and hoping, and they hope you never have to return to it. This from Michelle. Happy St George's Day to you and everyone listening. It's astonishing how Keith seems to somehow irritate me every single day with something new. Today he wants to reclaim the flag. What? From us patriots, new day, same Labour nonsense. Let's get Andy on St George's Day.
Morning, Mike. Andy in Portsmouth. Yeah, I'll be celebrating St George's Day today for sure. Once I finish work, I'm meeting up with my mum and some family tonight. We're going to have a nice meal and a few drinks, and I'm happily flying the St George's flag outside my house. I'm not embarrassed, I'm not ashamed of it at all, and I never will be. Wasn't it Emily Thornberry said, I don't know, a few years ago that, you know, if you flew white St George's flags outside your house, you always had a white van out there and you was chavvy or something. Well, I'm not. I'm just proud of my country, and I'm proud to be British.
Quite right too. Well said, Andy. And so say all of us. And the Labour government doesn't know what a St George's flag is. They've only just discovered it, the same way they didn't know what a woman was, the same way they don't know what nationality is, the same way they don't understand what patriotism is. You know, there's a whole dictionary of words we could give the Labour government with a definition attached to it, so they know what these words actually mean, and that some people actually fight and die because they're patriots. Some people actually fight for their country under the flag of St George. Some people actually think it means something. Keir Starmer doesn't think it means anything. And now he's only pretending to think it means something because he's frightened of losing a few seats in an election. How odious can you get from Starmer, the farmer harmer? 10 minutes to 7.
It's complete misogyny, and that was a threat to strap, or at least it was a dream of strapping J.K. Rowling to a stake and burning her alive for the sin of believing in biology. So this is two-tier Britain summed up. If you're a woman on the internet and you make a stupid comment during the riots, you get banged up for 31 months. If you're a bloke on the streets and you hold up such a sick placard as that, apparently nothing's happened so far anyway. You know, the thing is, these protests were orgies of misogyny. They were absolutely disgusting.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. Happy St George's Day, 6:53. Theo Usherwood is here with us. We've been talking about politicians and their two-facedness, shall we say. Ed Davey, who hasn't been heard from very much about the trans issue of late, not since the Supreme Court passed down its judgment last Wednesday. But we've dug something up, you'll be pleased to know, Theo, from 2023. Here is the leader of the Lib Dems on trans women.
I think we need to manage this and think about it and debate it with a bit more maturity and a bit more compassion.
Well, that's what Sir Keir Starmer once said to me, and he never did answer the question, can a woman have a penis?
Well, I've just answered that question.
They can.
Listen, I've made it really clear that if people, the vast majority of people will have the same gender as their biological sex, but a small number won't.
So a woman can have a penis?
Well, quite clearly.
Quite clearly. Well, I suggest a quick trip to the old GP for a bit of a lesson in biology for Sir Ed. Then he can find out for sure what's clear and what isn't clear. Right? Yes. Anyway, let's talk about what were we going to talk about? Oh, yeah, the foreign criminals listed in the league tables. Yeah. This was an announcement that was made beginning of the week by Labour. Yvette Cooper is now going to do what many people have been asking for a long time and basically publish the countries of origin of the people committing crimes in this country who are waiting to be deported. It now turns out we won't see those figures until about December.
No, this is because, of course, this is not something the Home Office originally wanted to do. Robert Jenrick, fair play to him, Shadow Justice Secretary.
He's been doing a good job.
He's been asking for this. Actually, he first asked for this back when he was a backbench Conservative MP. He asked of it from the Conservative government and was told no.
Yeah.
He's continued with his campaign, and Labour's now caved in and said it's going to publish it. But of course, they've given themselves a nice deadline all the way to December of this year to publish those details.
How do they get anything done?
Well, I suspect that actually what's going to happen is that officials are actually going to have to go back and collate the data. Now, you might say, in the home of common sense, you might say that all of this should have been done at the point of conviction.
Yeah, sure.
That if you're convicted, it should be on the record.
Right.
What is your... And they should compile a chart anyway, and it should be just like, OK, the public wants to see this now. There you go, British public, because we've got all the data or whatever.
Yes.
But I suspect they're going to have to...
keep records.
Because we keep records. Because we think that this is a particularly pertinent information as to the immigration status of people who've been convicted.
But of course, these are the same people who have been recording crimes by men and women wrongly, because they've been recording crimes by trans women as crimes by women.
So they're going to
which is going to have to change as well, right?
Change as well, yeah. And they're going to have to go. I imagine they're going to have to go back and they're going to have to go through the court cases, and they're going to have to look at every single case and go at that particular time. Was this, you know? Who is
but even so, right? If I was in charge of civil service, I'd go fine. I know it's going to be onerous, but there's a couple of million of you working here. Do you think you could any chance you could get it done, say by the end of May? It gives you like 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Any chance?
No.
I mean, why does it take 6 or 7 months?
Because
Because they don't know what they're doing.
Or they don't. Or
they're just not very efficient.
They're running on the go slow.
They are. We haven't mentioned properly yet is the front page of the Times story. I mentioned it in passing, but this policy reversal by Ed Miliband, the Energy Minister, which will introduce an amendment to legislation that will force GB Energy, our friend Jürgen, up there in Aberdeen, who apparently is still very, very sure that he's got the right job and in the right place at the right time. He's going to have to ensure that slavery and human trafficking is not taking place in the supply chain of solar panel manufacture. Well, I would suggest that that would pretty much outlaw buying anything from China, wouldn't it?
Yeah, these batteries, wind turbines, and the technology that's used contains materials which is suspected to be produced in Xinjiang province, which is in northwest China, which is, of course, where the Uyghur Muslims are, who are one of the most persecuted group of. I mean, it's horrendous what they have to go through, education camps and all the rights of it, and they've suffered huge human rights abuses from the Chinese Communist Party. So there was a number of, we actually came from the House of Lords, and then 92 MPs abstained on it, saying, hang on a moment, if we're going to accept all of these products from China to hit our net zero target by 2050, then we need to ensure that all of this technology is not made and manufactured in China and then exported here to the UK, and we hit net zero, but it's off the back of slave labour.
Exactly, and it was said at the time that this was a problem, and he kind of washed it.
He didn't want to do it,
and just said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You know, it's more important that we get net zero than it is where these come from."
And 92 Labour MPs abstained in a vote, which I think is a sizable rebellion. And Ed Miliband was, no, we're going to continue, we're going to do this. And now they've decided to reverse.
So this is like the second blow to his ambitions, really, isn't it? With British Steel being the first one, where he's been forced to kind of go, actually, net zero is not the priority of the government when it comes to certain things. You know, perhaps slavery is, perhaps British Steel is. One final story just before we go. It's the only sort of light story of the day. Loyalty and trust. No, we love dogs because they do as they are told. It says on page 3 of the Daily Mail. I don't know if you've got a dog. Page 5 of the Daily Mail, I should say.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear, isn't it? You know, your children don't do as they're told. Your partner doesn't do as they're told. Your friends don't do as they're told. But your dog does, and that's why you love him.
So dogs, like children, are high in nurturing and relationship security, but they have low levels of antagonism and conflict with their owners. I'm sure many people will think that's the...
My dog's an absolute patsy. He'll do everything I say. It's absolutely brilliant. Anyway, listen, Theo, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We've got lots more, of course, coming up. Isabel Oakeshott's going to join us. We're going to be talking to her about an incredible video that she has managed to get her hands on of some illegal migrants who appear to be living rough underneath a motorway flyover in London, and they try to attack the person making the video. We've also got St George's Day to talk about, and much, much else besides. This, of course, is Morning Glory.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls, you know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, so I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 7. It is, of course, Wednesday, the 23rd of April. Another week to go until we'll be looking at the 1st of May. And, of course, that's when the big local elections take place. Some parts of the country not voting, of course, because of the different state of affairs with the moving together of various different parts of county councils and local councils and district councils and all of that. Nobody quite understands it. Some people who are not being allowed to vote are quite angry about it, actually. But it's going to be a very, very fascinating, probably one of the most fascinating local elections for many a year. We'll bring you all the results, of course, as they come in right here on the home of Common Sense. Lots of you have got things to say about St George's Day, which it is today. Here's Karen.
Hi, Mike. We are celebrating St George's Day today. Me and my husband are going to our local pub. We're putting on St George's Day dinner, which is so lovely. We're proud to be English. We're proud to be British, whatever you want to call us. English, British, you know. We are proud of our ancestors who fought for us, who died for us to give us these freedoms, and we're not about to let them go. So Keir Starmer can push all he likes. We're going to push you back. We're proud to be British, and we have that fighting British spirit, just like our ancestors did.
Absolutely right. And it's, of course, the Labour Party who made people feel uncomfortable for flying the St George's flag many years ago. Now they say they want to reclaim it from those people seeking to cause division. Well, the only people causing division in this country right now is the bleeding government. They were causing division right, left and centre because people are so fed up with them. I mean, they couldn't even decide what a woman was until last Wednesday when they got told by a Supreme Court panel of judges exactly what a woman was. And it turns out it's a biological woman. Keir Starmer is being told this morning by all manner of people that he needs to apologise not only to Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP who was hounded so disgracefully because she had the same view that now the judges have shared with the rest of the world, but he has to apologise to all women for allowing this absolutely barbaric episode that has happened in our culture where men who claim to be women have been pushing women around and deciding that they should have access to their single-sex spaces for the best part of the last several years. We've seen the nature of the demonstrations that took place last weekend. They say they're going to be more this weekend, and the police have still yet to arrest anyone who was holding up banners calling for the death of certain individuals like J.K. Rowling, calling for the death of TERFs, who are people that they see as anti-trans. There's a picture of a couple of them there. Real nasty, ghastly, horrible people who are calling for harm to be done, for violence to be spread to people they don't agree with. And yet, apparently, that's no different, according to the police, from just saying hello, because then nobody is being arrested. Well, I say it's exactly the same as what Lucy Connolly did, and they should all be going to jail for 31 months, shouldn't they? 0344 499 1000. Also, Ed Miliband's got it in the neck. And, of course, Gary Lineker is mouthing off yet again on the BBC about the BBC and himself, his favourite subject. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Kev the Red from Stafford says, morning Mike, I'm flying the flag of St George outside my house today. On VE 80 day, I'll be flying the Union flag. We'll do so on many more occasions. I expect to be arrested for this at some point in the future. Well, apparently now Keir Starmer's been doing yet another flip-flop, and he says we should be flying the flag proudly. In the meantime, countless towns and cities will have thousands of Pakistani and Palestinian flags flying forevermore, with no threat of arrest from two-tier, never here, never clear, oh dear, Keir. Very true. Actually saw a Palestinian flag flying just the other day in a road not far away from where I live. I see Starmer couldn't include stopping the illegal migrants coming as part of that fishing rights deal, says Pete the Mole. And Michelle in Altrincham, Michelle from Altrincham says, why on earth is Starmer still in number 10? He's utterly incompetent, weak as dishwater, and has no vision or backbone. The country's falling apart, and all he offers is waffle, U-turns, empty sound bites. It's embarrassing. We deserve better. I think that's right. I think Keir Starmer this morning looks ever weaker with every single move. Front page of the Daily Mail says, Kemi, this is Kemi Badenoch, of course, she says the Prime Minister owes an apology to so many women because she had a great day in Parliament yesterday. Let's talk to Joanna Bell, political journalist, about how it all unfolded. Joanna, very good morning to you.
Good morning and happy George Day, St. George's Day to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's have a look, shall we, at what Keir Starmer did. We're going to sort of start the day with Keir Starmer starting his day yesterday, saying how happy he was, and you can see it in his face, that he can now define what a woman is.
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you don't believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. So I think it's important that we see the judgment for what it is. It's a welcome step forward. It's real clarity in an area where we did need clarity. I'm pleased it's come about. We need to move and make sure that we now ensure that all guidance is in the right place according to that judgment.
What are your words for the trans community who are worried about what this could mean for them?
Well, look, I think it is important that we have clarity about the law. That's what the Supreme Court is there for. So obviously that's an important and welcome step, and we go forward from there.
Have you ever seen anybody so incapable of speech? I mean, nobody needed clarity on what a woman is. You know, I can see that you're a woman. Most women can see that you're a woman. Most women can see when women are not women. You know, he's hiding behind this legal framework again. And apparently he got it wrong. Because when he said in 2023 that it's not just my opinion that trans women are women, it's the law, he got the law wrong.
Well, I would have to argue. I was on the netball team, and some of the women did look like men on there, but they were biological women, Mike. Look, people are calling for Keir to apologise, but I mean, at this point, I think he needs to resign if he can't identify what a biological woman is, right. Or at least, you know, women were persecuted. Some of them were forced to take their employers to court for discrimination because they were fired over so-called transphobia. And, you know, at this point, you know, his position and Angela Rayner's is untenable. Yeah. They threw all women of this country under the bus, and they need to stand down or at least make some big waves in making up for what they did to women, and that was betray every woman in Britain.
And starting with Rosie Duffield, who's written in the Mail today, Kemi Badenoch says, you know, he should be apologising to all women, and he should at least acknowledge that he got it wrong, I think, and he should acknowledge that the Labour government got it wrong, and he should acknowledge that now he knows what the law is, and now that he knows that the rights of women are to be protected above all else, you know, he should basically say that he should at least confess that he didn't understand what he was talking about. But he's going to try and get away with saying nothing, isn't he?
Well, he's after saying, you know, he welcomes the judgment. He's glad he's, you know, gained some clarity on the subject. But, you know, it shouldn't have taken a judge to give him clarity. You know, women were being persecuted all over the country. Safeguarding for girls was taken away. You know, there was nurses who were being ousted from their professions because the doctors were coming into their changing rooms, and it's really not enough for Keir to apologise. In fact, I would have had more respect for him had he had courage in his convictions and stuck to his guns about what he thought what a woman is. But he's just shown that he is just going to follow the baying mob at any opportunity. So where does that leave us, moving forward?
Well, exactly right. I mean, I said this earlier in the show, surely he could have said it differently as well, but he's so lacking in grace and lacking in the kind of common touch, because what he should have said was, look, there was a time when it was unclear what the law actually said. We were under the impression that the equality law said that a woman could be a woman if she had identified as one. That has now been confirmed to be wrong. We will protect those people who wish to identify as women because they are still protected under the law, which they are. And we'll make sure that no harm comes to them, or something like that. He could have easily finessed it a bit better, is what I'm saying.
Exactly, or at least take the whip away from any of his backbenchers or politicians on the Labour side who are arguing with the judgment. You've got Nadia Whitcomb, who has, vowed to fight this judgment, and then you had all, the text messages, Angela Eagle over the weekend, who were vowing to fight the judgment. He should be taking the whip away from anybody who disagrees with the judgment,
right. Because you can't disagree with the judgment. The judgment is the law. That's it. End of story. There is, and also in the very extensively written judgment, there's plenty of room in there for all of these people who are complaining that, trans people are now in danger. They haven't got any rights. They haven't got any protections. They're all written down in the judgment, so it's nonsense to say that. Let's have a look at Bridget Phillipson. She was handed the poison chalice yesterday. I mean, he didn't even have the courage to turn up and deliver the speech himself. This is Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, of course, who also happens to be Equalities Minister, delivering the government statement.
This government will continue as before, working to protect single-sex spaces based on biological sex, now with the added clarity of this ruling. And we will continue our wider work with commitment, with compassion, to protect all of those who need it, right across society. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a government that will support the rights of women and trans people, now and always.
Yes, all very well, of course, but she's been accused of sort of barefaced lies because she's made out that the Labour government and the Labour Party have always held this position, which is totally not true.
It's completely false. Angela Rayner, they all said that, what was it, that women could have a penis. I think every single one of them are on record saying that.
Yeah.
So this is all just gaslighting the public. They totally threw women under the bus. They prosecuted them, and now they're trying to fight for trans rights. Like they said, there's a tiny small percentage of people who are trans, and they put 50% of Britain's population ahead of that 1%, or if that is the correct figure.
Yeah.
So really, there's really no going back on what they said. They really need to stand down. I know that's never going to happen, but if he was going to be the bigger picture, the bigger person, he would stand down or at least reshuffle.
But he hasn't even got the nous or the kind of the grace to admit that he was wrong. So you have to drag him kicking and screaming out of Downing Street, I think. Speaking of which, by the way,
he's at this point, if he hasn't apologised by now, he's not going to apologise.
Well, it took him 6 days to come out and say that mealy-mouthed description of what we just played you, what he just said. And so, I mean, that's the kind of level we're talking about here.
Well, he was on holidays, wasn't he?
Well, so what? He was able to put out. He went to church on Sunday and gave some Easter eggs away to some kids. He made a statement about breakfast clubs on Monday, which was Easter Monday. He wasn't on holiday those 2 days. He could have said something. And even if you're on holiday and you're Prime Minister, it's not as if you're out of touch. Nobody knows where he went still. We have no clue.
Well, this is what we've come to expect from, the leader of, of the UK. He's just very flip-flops all the time. With tensions flaring in the Middle East and everywhere else. Is this really the man that if World War III does happen, that he's going to be leading Britain?
Heaven help us. I mean,
even his most ardent supporters must be scared of that prospect.
Absolutely right. And of course, there are those who believe that he probably went on holiday at this time completely and utterly intentionally because he knew this trans story was going to break. But let's have a look at Kemi Badenoch, because she had a great day in Parliament yesterday, possibly the best she's had since she's been Leader of the Opposition.
In 2021, the Prime Minister said it is not right to say only women have a cervix. In 2022, he said it is the law that trans women are women. In 2023, he said, and I quote, 99% of women don't have a penis. I know what a woman is, and I always have. Yeah. The people of this country know what a woman is. Yeah. We didn't need the Supreme Court to tell us that, but this government did. Yeah. A Labour government so desperate to jump on a bandwagon that they abandoned common sense, along with the SNP, who put rapists in women's prisons, and, of course, the Liberal Democrats.
And, I mean, obviously, Prime Minister's questions coming up. First one back since the Easter break. Surely this time Kemi Badenoch will make this stick on him, won't she?
I mean, she's on fire right now, and if she doesn't, you know, score political points with this, you know, she never will. You know, she really has this opportunity to wipe the floor with Keir today, and everybody's going to be watching PMQs today to see how she does it. Her speech yesterday was absolutely magnificent.
It was, and it shows you that she does have the ability to do it. So it's a shame she didn't do it before now, but at least now she has done it. So we'll look forward to 12 o'clock on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show. Joanne, thank you very much indeed. Joanna Bell, there, political journalist, saying that Kemi Badenoch is absolutely on it right now, and she should be able to sort of finish the job off and do Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's questions and leave him nowhere to go. Because he should be left with nowhere to go. And as I've often done, I'll offer you a couple of questions. You know, first question, can you now define what a woman is, Keir Starmer? And watch him mumble and stumble around and talk about clarity and talk about, you know, all of the things. You know, and why did you think that a woman could have a penis? And were you wrong? And why did you not know the law? You know, there are so many questions you could put to him. Dallas says this morning, Mike, two-tier is quite right. The Supreme Court's decision has given us clarity, so apparently I'm a woman. Up till now, I haven't been sure. He's still a robot, though, I can tell you that. And one here from Mark in Hayling. Mike, brilliant show as usual. I'm flying our St George's flag with pride here in Hayling Island. This Labour government is a disgrace, untrustworthy and dismantling our democracy in this country. This is so worrying. And one here from Norris, I think it is, who says, happy St George's Day, great show as always. I'll be flying the English flag today from my flagpole in Scotland. Not only will it annoy all the right people, I'm Scottish by the way, but it will also pay tribute to my missus, who recently found out she was 55% English. P.S. That clip of you in 2019 with the Polish guy had me laughing my head off. Bring back the curls. We can play that, actually. Maybe we'll play it after this and give you a bit of light relief. This is from the archives of Talk Radio back in 2019. 7:18.
free speech is a huge issue for the Trump administration. We've seen Ofcom, which is Office for Communications, a big government quango, £1 billion quango, in fact, in the UK, block a few social media websites from the US in the UK, and that has reached the desks of the White House, and they are not happy about that at all. So the government needs to have restate free speech in the UK to get that trade deal.
Yeah, well, a country that lives and breathes free speech, to have one of its closest allies in this place is a kind of curious position for Trump and Vance and others to be in.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:22. I got this from Ken on Twitter, or X if you prefer. Mike, can someone in Parliament put forward a motion for the High Court to rule on the definition of Keir Starmer? From what I can see, he's just a quivering blob of jelly. Excellent. That would be good, wouldn't it? Can we have a legal definition, please, of Sir Keith Stalin? That would be very kind. Now, let's get a voice note from Sean on Kemi.
Morning, Mike. Sean from Grimsby here. I listened to Kemi Badenoch's response yesterday in the House, and I thought she was absolutely excellent. And it's the best that I've seen her ever since she's become leader. And keep it up. That's what we want. We want more of this off Kemi. You know what I mean? I quite like Kemi, but she needs to just keep on doing what she's doing yesterday. Great show, mate.
Yeah, Sean, I think you're absolutely right. I think most people would agree that Kemi Badenoch absolutely knocked the stuffing out of Labour because they're so po-faced, they're so hypocritical, and they were coming out with bare-faced lies yesterday, which she quite rightly pointed out. And Bridget Phillipson, as I say, was handed the poison chalice of actually being the person to deliver said lies, to try and make out that, you know, we can fool all of the people all of the time. We can pretend that we've always supported and protected women's single-sex spaces. They haven't. They have not done that. Almost every single member of the cabinet is on record as saying trans women are women and that they should have access to women's single-sex spaces. And yet now they're trying to pretend that that never happened. It's almost like they think they've woken up from a dream, and that was all nonsense. Now, before we speak to Debbie Hayton, journalist and author of Transsexual Apostate, My Journey Back to Reality, have a look at something from our archives. This has been doing the rounds on social media, and it's also playing. If you watch us on TV on the app, you'll be seeing it. But it's me down on College Green in 2019, during the time when the whole Brexit debate was going on. There was a whole stalemate. It was before Boris Johnson won the election in December, and it was pretty cold, as you'll be able to see. But this is about polls.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls, you know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
But later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
This is one of the great moments, that. Really funny. It was bleeding cold down there, though. I remember Colonel Bob Stewart once came in when he was an MP to sit in the tent of shame, as we used to call it. And he said, do you know, he said, when I was in the army, if it was this cold, we would not be operational. And because we didn't have, all we had was a tiny little heater, which was of no use to man or beast. I ended up having to buy a huge parka with fur in it in order to sit there, because it was at one point, I think it was 2 degrees. I think it was the coldest we actually broadcasted. Absolutely shocking stuff. Anyway, listen, let's go back to where we are. Debbie Hayton's here, journalist and author of Transsexual Apostate, My Journey Back to Reality. Debbie, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
It's been quite an interesting week, hasn't it?
It certainly has been, and it's put the government on the spot, hasn't it?
It really has. And I don't think they've come out of it at all well. I mean, Keir Starmer finally broke his silence 6 days late after the Supreme Court had issued their ruling on Wednesday of last week. I said last week, surely now the Prime Minister has to come out and admit that he got it wrong, admit that he misunderstood the law, not that there's now clarity or that it's now much more obvious what's going on. And also the thing that I think certainly many of the trans activists have missed is that in the ruling there are plenty of protections for trans people.
Well, of course there are. You're absolutely right there, Mike. But even after 6 days, Starmer hasn't been able to come up with a clear answer. No. Yesterday he was asked, do you believe that trans women are women? And he told everybody what the Supreme Court thought, not what he thought. Right. And that marks him out as different to what Kemi Badenoch's been saying, because she's quite clear about what she thinks.
Yeah, and isn't it a bit disingenuous of Bridget Phillipson and all other Labour cabinet members to try to make out that they've always protected single-sex spaces for women? They've always stood up for that, which they haven't. The fact that they've always thought that, you know, biological women were women, and that they've always thought that trans women were not women. Well, quite to the contrary, that's exactly what they haven't believed.
Well, yes, they're changing the tune and then trying to hide it. People have said, will we ever get an apology from these people? But I suspect what we're seeing is that they'll claim they've believed this all along, which is just not true.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, all of these horrible sort of disputes that have been going on, people claiming that they're going to try and find exemptions, people claiming that... Do you think that's all going to disappear? And the demos are going to disappear, or is this going to be something that sort of drags on like a bit of a saw?
Well, I hope these demos disappear, because they're not doing the rights of trans people any good at all. They seem to be drawing in any anarchist, anybody with a grievance, to fight for a cause where they think they can't be challenged and haven't been challenged up until now.
Yeah. And as far as your own personal experience goes, Debbie, what's your view of the way that the nation and the public treats trans people?
Well, nobody really cares. Away from social media, in real life, people are more bothered about whether I do my job properly, whether I turn up for my duties and play my part in society. That's what people care about, and that's what the law protects. The law protects the rights, my rights not to be treated any less favourably than anybody else, and I wish Starmer would say that rather than just talk about clarity. Yeah. It's not clear what he's been clear about, what he's claiming clarity about.
No, he loves to hide behind a sort of legal framework, doesn't he? Which is why I'm making much of the fact that he got it wrong under the law, because he's always telling us what a great lawyer he is. He's always telling us that, you know, he lives by the law, you know, the law is what defines him. He was once the prosecutor of the Crown Prosecution Service, the chief prosecutor, you know, he knows exactly how the law should work. And if he doesn't like the law, he's going to change the law. I was quite surprised, actually, that he caved into this in the way that he did.
Well, the law is clear, Mike. The problem had been that the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act are unclear, and they don't really sit well besides each other. Right. The Equality Act, for example, doesn't define the word sex, but the Supreme Court was able to go back to the Sex Discrimination Act of 1975, which does define sex. And surely, as a lawyer, Starmer should have been able to see that for himself.
Yeah, but of course he wasn't able to, because he didn't want to, because he's been captured by all of the fanatics and the activists in his own party. And that's why I think he's been so circumspect about saying anything that he might later regret. And that's why he won't admit that he got it wrong, and that's why he won't apologise, I suspect.
Yeah, I suspect the question we'll never really know is, did Starmer believe all this guff all along, or was he running scared from a mob that he was frightened of?
Yeah. Because I think we know the answer to that, and it's the latter part of that choice, I think, that you've just described. But the other thing that I'm quite surprised about is as you say, not just so much the satellite kind of anarchists that help celebrate and support some of these more extreme trans activists, but it's the fact that they seem sort of obsessed about toilets. It's all they want to talk about, is which toilet do they use. I mean, they had this kind of rather disgraceful pastime at the weekend where they're all peeing in public. And I mean, these are men at the end of the day, peeing in a public place to say that we won't be told where we can go. I mean, it's all a bit unsavoury, isn't it?
Well, it is. And in other species, I used to have a male cat, and my male cat would mark out its territory in that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and do you expect that the police will change their tune as well and start arresting some of these people?
Well, I hope they do. Some of those placards, for example, were appalling.
Yeah.
And this police force, which has been so keen to hunt down people who have said something inappropriate on social media, need to start looking into what people are saying on placards on the streets of London.
So in your view, then, at the end of the day, Debbie, do you think this will all die down and we'll look back on it in a year's time and think, what on earth were we thinking?
I think it may take more than a year, but hopefully eventually we'll look back and think, what was all that about?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it's doing nobody any good, isn't this?
No, it really isn't. Debbie, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Debbie Hayton, journalist and author of Transsexual Apostate, My Journey Back to Reality. Steve says this: was it a coincidence that a number of female Labour MPs wore pink yesterday when dropping their rapid defence of trans women being women after their glorious leader's sudden change of mind? Interesting. Morning, Mike. Kemi just has to ask, what is a woman 4 times, and why have you wasted 10 years on this pointless topic, and that will slay them, says Betty. That's, of course, at Prime Minister's Questions, which will be coming up later on today. You'll hear all about it and watch it during Julie Hartley-Brewer's show. Doug says, Mike, maybe instead of showing that Netflix show in schools, he should show footage of the protesters for the weekend. Grown men peeing on statues, placards asking for J.K. Rowling to be killed. Where is Starmer on this, and where are the police? Well, it's a very good point. I mean, the police yesterday, or the day before, were putting out the usual messages asking for people, if they had any evidence, to supply it to them. If they had any video evidence of people holding up placards which were threatening to kill, holding up placards that were, at the very least, quite violent, making threats to people, TERFs. The only good TERF is a dead TERF. I mean, there were plenty of opportunities, you would have thought, for the police to have arrested them on the day. But, of course, they didn't do it. Why? Because of two-tier policing, because of two-tier justice, and because of the people running the Metropolitan Police who are frightened of their own shadow and really frightened of upsetting anybody on the left. That is the problem. Let's get a voice note from Andrew.
Morning, Mike. Andrew in Oxfordshire. Great show as usual. Just had a look on Google's calendar, and as per, they celebrate most days on there, all except the one day which is most patriotic to all English people, St George's Day. Although they do recognise it on their homepage. But if you look on your phone, Guy Fawkes Day's on there, Shrove Tuesday, St George's Day, missing in action. Cheers, buddy.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Yes, that's hardly surprising, is it? I mean, a lot of people are asking me the question as to whether Keir Starmer's flying the St George's flag over Downing Street. We'll try and check that out and see whether he is, because for all of his talk about wanting to reclaim the flag, it's not clear whether he's reclaimed it and put it up the flagpole outside of Downing Street. We shall see. Don't forget, there were government departments at one point flying the LGBT flag in places around the world. Not necessarily in this country, but in some parts of this country, but very much in other parts of the world, as if that was the representation, the true representation of this great British nation of ours. Marco from Swindon says, so Starmer the lawyer gets the law wrong. Did he by any chance go to the Jonathan Reynolds School of Law? Yeah, very possibly. Took legal advice from a learned friend. I'm sorry, you're not my learned friend, you're just a trainee solicitor. 7:34.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. It is 7:37, more or less. Morning, says Damon from Wigan. All this trans rubbish should never have got so big and powerful. And in my view, there is only two C's, simple, and Britain needs to get back to having common sense. Mike for Prime Minister will sort the bloody country out. Well, somebody needs to do it. Two-tier Keir must resign, says Tony. Our political establishment put women's lives in danger. And Roger in Hounslow. Mike, how on earth did we allow ourselves to be led by a bunch of lefty no-hopers who haven't got a clue how to run a boot sale stall, let alone a country? I mean, it's becoming more and more clear, isn't it, that this lot just don't have an idea of what they're doing. I wrote a piece in the Telegraph last week about this, how completely and utterly incompetent they are in almost every aspect of government. You know, whether it be the economy, thanks to Rachel Reeves, who's just had another piece of bad news handed to her by the IMF in Washington yesterday, who have now downgraded the prospects of growth in this country to 1.1%. Which is like saying there isn't any growth at all. If that was your hair growing, you'd never need to get it cut because it would never grow long enough. All the way down to the Trade Secretary, you know, the lying solicitor who wasn't a solicitor, who's now in charge of British Steel, down to Ed Miliband, who's in the news this morning because, of course, of his stupid net zero plan. And he's had to row back on the idea of actually buying in solar panels from China because they're made by slaves, which he said he wasn't worried about, but he's now having to U-turn on. I mean, you take any aspect of the government. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, doesn't know one end of her elbow from the other. I was almost going to say something else there, you know what I mean. You know, there's not one area of this government where you can sort of, in any way, hopefully say that they're doing a good job, is there? Is there one part of it that works? I don't think there is. I'll tell you what, the other thing that's gone wrong for them is potholes, because a piece this morning in The Sun, car breakdowns caused by Britain's pothole plague surged nearly 20% in just a year. More than 9,400 motorists called the RAC between January and March after their vehicles were battered by crater-riddled roads. It's up from 7,900 over the same period last year. And you've got to say, you might not want to blame the Labour government for that, but certainly local councils are not doing their job. Let's talk to Mr Pothole, a.k.a. Mark Morrell, who's, of course, a pothole campaigner, has been one for many a year. Mark, a very good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning, Mike. Not too bad. Lovely information this morning. I think I'm getting a regular weekly spot with you, Mike.
Well, I mean, I think until the potholes start to get reduced and rather than increase, I think you may well have to be right. But this is dreadful, isn't it? It's more bad news piled on more bad news.
Yeah. I mean, not only is that 20% increase over the last 12 months, the actual breakdown numbers over doubled in between January and March this year compared to the previous 3 months. So it's on a decline. I mean, government going to try out about their £1.6 billion funding, the record funding. Well, it's not actually record funding because £1.7 billion was put in a couple of years ago. Yeah. But over the last 10 years, Mike, the network has got worse by £550 million a year on average.
Right.
Even with government funding £1.2 billion a year. So, you know, we've got this £17 billion backlog not being addressed. And you said about common sense. Well, common sense says that if your road network is failing, and in 15 years' time, 51% of your road network will be structurally unsound, you need to do something about it because it's costing the UK economy an estimated £14.4 billion a year. So common sense is, let's invest in our roads because we will save money in the long term. Let's look at how we do things in terms of properly, not wasting hundreds of millions of pounds with poor quality repairs. I think I tweeted yesterday about a repair in Cardiff costing £4.13.
Yes.
Well, you can't get the materials for that. So, you know, the stats and information, I dig through it because, you know, I'm a pain in the backside, Mike, with it really, because I like to understand.
Thank God you are.
happening. But they're not living in the real world. We get the. I'm very disappointed with Lillian Greenwood because she was a brilliant chair of the Select Committee. Now she's the Roads Minister, and it's the same thing. And I think it's just down to the civil service, to be honest, more than anything else. And you say about poor government, I think we've got extremely poor civil service and people in charge at a lot of the departments that supposedly run the country.
Well, that's right. I mean, we were talking earlier today about the idea by Yvette Cooper that she wants to give nationality information out on all the foreign criminals that come to this country and are still committing crime before they get deported, and which countries they're originally from. And it was all a big fanfare, let's all get this information out in the public domain and let's get it out in the open. And then we hear, we won't be able to get it to you till December. And you're going, in what world, and in what commercial world would you wait that long for any information on anything?
Yeah, you're right. And the thing is also, it's only those who are being deported. It's not the ones that they can't deport. So don't get me on that subject, Mike.
No, I know. But I mean, the fact is, it's not insignificant when it comes to the state of our roads, because one of the reasons why I believe the roads are in a much worse state is because there's a lot more people driving on them. And when you think of all the extra people now living here, and you're looking at some pretty bad potholes there. I mean, if you go into one of those potholes that deep with a car which has got, shall we say, not a dodgy tyre, but a tyre that's not, brand new or tip-top, you're going to get at the very least a puncture, possibly even more difficult damage to fix on the axle.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I did a study a few years ago about the increase in revenues to the Exchequer based upon the increase in vehicles on our road, the increase in fuel duty and VAT and associated. They're actually pulling in an extra £25 billion a year from what they were in the year 2000. Right. So there's money, they got the money coming in, but they're not spending it on maintaining the roads.
No. And is that road tax money you're talking about?
No, that's fuel duty, VAT on fuel duty, a road fund licence, obviously repairs as well, because you pay VAT on repairs. Because if someone damages their wheel or tyre and anything else, the government get 20% cut of that, don't they?
Yeah, of course, they really do. So, I mean, is there any part of Britain that you can say with any kind of assuredness that is leading the way here? Is there any council in particular or any place that's doing well on potholes?
They're all trying, to be fair. I mean, I don't want to be overcritical with the councils, because I've met some people there really trying to do a good job without the resources to do it. One that comes to mind is Stoke-on-Trent. There's a team up there, James Harper and his team. He's probably the most famous pothole repairer. His team work. They're direct for the council. They're better than most contractors, to be honest. Right, they take a pride in it. They live in the actual area. Since they've had the Pothole Pro, they've actually done 7 years' work in 12 months, and they do a proper job. They're not on phones. They're actually they make the machine work because it's a big capital investment. I wish I could clone them across the country, Mike.
Yeah, it would be nice if somebody could show them the way, so that they could then just go, this is how you should be doing it. This is what to do, and this is the money you need to do it. Because at the moment, again, with this government, there's a lot of promises being made and a lot of figures being sort of bandied about. But meanwhile, the roads are still knackered.
Yeah, I mean, and they don't understand the value of the asset. I mean, it's the lifeblood in terms of the blood supply of the UK economy, and we all have to use them daily, and we're paying a fortune already. But obviously, money's getting hived off elsewhere. Yeah. We need a long-term investment plan to resurface our roads, because that's the answer. There's no panacea. I mean, a pothole is a sign of a failure at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, listen, keep up the good work, Mark. Very good to see you again. Mr. Pothole, he's been campaigning for years. God bless him. He's the one man that you go to who is a proper expert on everything you need to know about potholes. We'll be speaking to him on a regular basis, I'm sure. Mike says, somebody here without a name, I'm disgusted to see our brave soldiers could be facing spurious charges while defending British civilians against terrorists who were trying to kill and maim us. Sorry, it's from Stuart. They put their lives in danger so we, the public, could sleep safely. This is a story on the front page of the Times this morning in which it's revealed that Labour, in addition to all of the other things that they're doing to betray the great British public, are actually planning to go after SAS former veterans, or now current veterans, from Special Forces who worked in Northern Ireland decades ago. They were offered a conditional amnesty originally in case they were suspected of any crimes that might have taken place during the Troubles. And those amnesties are now going to be lifted. Many of these men are in their 70s and 80s, and the SAS Regimental Association, which represents both regular and reserve units of the Special Air Service, have urged their members to write to their MPs to say hundreds of veterans are ensnared in legal processes, in many cases facing years of more uncertainty and stress after decades of the same. And it is unsurprising that veterans feel unjustly hounded just for doing their duty. And that, I think, tells you all you need to know about this Labour government, all you need to know about Keir Starmer, who yesterday was parading himself up and down around military helicopters and members of the armed forces, making out that he cares about people who give their lives and fight for this great country of ours. Well, I'm afraid that does, in fact, give the lie to that particular situation. David says this, on veterans' prosecutions, don't also forget that Tony Blair gave the terrorists a get-out-of-jail-free amnesty letter, so prosecute those that protect us and allow the terrorists freedom. Absolutely disgusting. This should hurt any recruitment drive for the armed forces. Well, you're quite right, David. Again, similar to the police situation, a lot of people don't want to join the armed forces because they think, what's going to happen if I get involved in some kind of skirmish and somebody dies? Am I going to be prosecuted 20 years later, 30 years later, 50 years later? Am I going to be hounded to death? Absolutely ridiculous. Let's get a voice note from Mick.
Morning, Mike. Mick from Lincolnshire here. Just going back to your article in the Times around the Special Forces being investigated over troubles in Northern Ireland. It isn't just the Special Forces. This has been going on since Tony Blair signed up to the Good Friday Agreement, that past cases that have been investigated numerous times and nothing found, keep getting dragged up, and it's putting a lot of veterans in a very unstable situation because of age, health, etc. Thanks, Harry. Great show, Mike. Cheers.
Yeah, Mick, it's absolutely disgraceful what's being done to some of these guys, and they shouldn't have to be living out the last years of their lives worried about what's going to happen to them in a court of law for something they did while they were fighting for their country, under instructions from the government of the day. Mick says, morning, Mike, happy St George's Day. If you don't display your flag, you'll be classed as a right-wing thug. Great show. Anthony Selby, good morning, Mike. Happy St George's Day to you and all your listeners and viewers. And Mike says this from Herne Bay. Fingers crossed Kemi and other MPs nail Starmer in PMQs today. The trans issue, grooming gangs and the economy should be more than enough to leave him floundering. Well, you would like to think so, wouldn't you? Coming up, we're going to talk about another issue. That is, we're just looking at a live shot of Downing Street there, and there is a St George's flag. So at least on this one, he's put his money where his mouth is. It looks a bit limp, though, doesn't it? Not much wind down there. It's a pretty good summation of the state of this government. There's a flag on the flagpole, but it's not actually blowing in the wind. Maybe we could try and get some kind of wind up there to make it actually illustratable a bit more. But there we are. So he is at least flying one from Downing Street, so that's a step in the right direction. But as I say, you can't expect much from him on this St George's Day when he goes into Parliament to take part in Prime Minister's questions, because he normally doesn't answer any questions. We'll see how he gets on today. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Coming up, we're going to talk about another issue which is going to possibly get him around the ghoulies, and that is the fisherman's giveaway. Because apparently, because he wants to help out the European Union so much, and he wants them to sign up to some kind of EU defence pact, he's willing to give away yet more fishermen's rights. We'll talk to a fisherman coming next. Right.
The reports from his doctors had suggested that his convalescence was going well. But on the other hand, his immune system was extremely depressed by what had happened. And he had, I understand, been warned by his doctors that if he mixed with people, he was in serious danger of catching an infection that could end his days.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:53. Now, here's a good one from Matt, who has actually said this on Twitter, or X. Why is the damage that electric cars, buses and now lorries cause to our roads not being discussed? More of these vehicles on our roads that are, on average, around 30% heavier than their fossil fuel counterparts will undoubtedly put more strain on the road service. Well, you will not be, hopefully, at all surprised to know, Matt, that I talk about it quite a lot. One of the things that I say is the reason why the pothole situation in this country is as bad as it is because of all these bleeding electric vehicles. I mean, imagine how much an electric bus weighs, or an electric van. Almost all the delivery vans now for the supermarkets are electric. An awful lot of the courier vans are electric. So forget about the cars being heavier. How heavy do you think a van is? How heavy do you think the London electric taxis are now? Absolutely extraordinary stuff. But we'll come back to that subject, I'm sure, later. Dave in South Gloucestershire says, wherever I go, I see hundreds of vehicles, from cars to huge lorries, the rear ends of which have red and yellow diagonal stripes and are marked highway maintenance. If we have all these maintenance people working on our highways, why then are our roads in such a state? Or does highway not refer to roads? Well, it does. But highway maintenance, I think, is one of those euphemisms for I'm just going to drive around and park it in places that look like I'm doing something, but I'm actually not doing anything. You see them on the motorway, and they're sort of parked on the lay-bys or on the hard shoulders, and you're not sure if they're police vehicles at first, and you kind of look at them and you go, I don't know what they do. What are they doing? Nobody knows. Let's talk to Matt Coker, who's a charter fishing skipper, because the fishing business is back in the news. Keir Starmer, of course, famously loves the European Union. Lately, he's been having lots of chats with them and lots of talks with them about all sorts of things, signing up to new pacts with them about trade, about food, about defence. Now, he's been warned not to buckle on fishing, because, of course, Emmanuel Macron and the French government and Brussels as well are trying to get more fishing rights out of us in order to get an agreement on defence, which seems to me to be putting the cat amongst the pigeons. Matt, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. What's all this about? You know, why does Starmer want to give away even more fishing rights and make your job even harder?
Well, I really can't answer that. I mean, I don't know what he's playing at, because, you know, it just seems that he's looking after the big businesses as usual. And when it comes to the UK fishing industry, which have been hammered continuously for the last 50 years, and we finally got to a position where it looked like we was going to start to come back the other way, and he's just going to throw it all away again. And, you know, I mean, at least the last government did try, and we was actually on the way to possibly getting back our waters, which is now not going to happen. I mean, how hard is it at the moment for you to fish, and how many sort of foreign boats do you see on a daily basis? We see them every day, and it's a terribly difficult industry anyway to work in. I mean, you're basically farmers of the sea, except for you don't control or own your field, and now you're sharing your field with foreign boats which are allowed to catch more. And we're told to put the fish back, and, you know, we have to reduce the quotas and try and look after the stocks. And we're watching other boats come in and take what they want. And it's very difficult to watch this going on day in, day out. Yeah. And, I mean, the numbers of fishing boats is still in decline, isn't it, in this country? It will be, yeah, and it is. I mean, a lot of the people I know, you know, a lot of my friends and everything, they've all sold up because there was just no hope in the end, you know. And then when we had Brexit, we finally got some hope that we could actually start to make a living out of this again.
Right.
And now it's been sold off for the big business, you know, these defence companies. It's just more money in their pocket, and he's going to give away our livelihoods to make them richer. And I just don't agree with it. Right. It's really a backward situation.
And where are you mostly fishing these days? What sort of areas are you in on a weekly basis?
Well, we always fish in the English Channel, right in the Dover Straits. Right. So, I mean, we're not only sort of watching these EU vessels come over into our waters and fish, you know, unhindered pretty much. We're also watching French warships bringing over migrant boats and putting them in our waters. And it's, you know, it's very difficult to watch when, you know, you're going out the harbour, you're already restricted on what you can actually catch. You know, and then as you cross out into the sea to sort of start your fishing, you're seeing French boats which are not meant to be there anyway, but under a transition deal, they're allowed to still carry on at the moment. And then you see a warship come across and they've got a migrant boat with it, and you think, I mean, we seem to be on the back foot in the UK. Yeah. We can't seem to do anything.
Well, that's it. And you're, you know, working your nuts off trying to make a living, and you're trying very hard to keep the sort of the pressure on because of all the financial pressures I assume you're getting in your household, like everybody else is. You know, it's getting harder and harder to make money in this country.
Well, it is. I mean, we moved into sport fishing many years ago because it was, you know, I mean, 50 years ago they opened up the waters to the EU, and it all started then. And my family, I mean, they fished in the English Channel for 100 years, and my grandfather could see the way it was going, the same as my father. And they started to move into sport fishing. So we have customers on the boat now, and we take them out to fish. Right. And they ask me the same questions every day. You know, they can't understand why, you know, this is going on, and it's very difficult for me to explain it because there is no answer. You know, it's really just very bad management of what could be our richest resource. You know, one of our last sort of remaining resources we've got around the UK, which we can use to sell to other people. We can sell the fish to Europe and everything. And we're just giving it all away. I don't understand it.
It's shocking, isn't it? Great to talk to you, Matt. We'll keep it up, and we'll keep in touch because I'm sure there'll be some things that we can talk about in the future going forward. Matt Coker, there, Charter Fishing Skipper, goes out into the English Channel. What does he see? Sees a lot of foreign boats, French boats, Spanish boats, Belgian boats probably as well, fishing in the waters that he thought were his to fish in, and taking more fish out of those waters because they're not restricted by the same kind of restrictions as we are in this country. And then you look on the other side of the boat, oh look, there's a load of migrants coming in with some French military vessels. Marvellous, isn't it? 0344 499 1000 is the number. Esther McVeigh coming up in the next hour. We'll talk to Isabel Oakeshott as well. Also more on the trans nonsense from Sir Keir Starmer and Captain Flip Flop and the rest of his motley crew. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after the news. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to Morning Glory. 3 minutes past 8. It's coming up to, the second and third hour of the show. Halfway through we are now. Richard Tice is going to be here. Esther McVeigh is here. We're going to be talking to Isabel Oakeshott. A remarkable video that she's got her hands on of some illegal migrants basically sleeping rough in tents underneath a flyover in London. Extraordinary stuff. We'll be bringing you that right here. It's St George's Day, of course, so we're celebrating that. And believe it or not, Keir Starmer has rediscovered the flag. There it is, flying over Downing Street. They've brought a bit of wind with it as well. Look at that. We asked for wind and there it is. I mean, even the home of common sense can control the flag that's on. It's actually blowing now. Look at it. It's astonishing. It was completely still before, and as soon as I ordered the wind, up it came. Marvellous. Let's get a voice note from Laura.
Morning, Mike. Laura in Wiltshire. Plenty of St George's flags around here. Just thinking about the limp flag at Downing Street. I'm sure it'll start blowing once he starts his hot air at PMQs. Great show.
Well, maybe he's woken up now because it's certainly blowing a good one now. Like it's in a bit of a gale going on. Anyway, listen, we've got plenty to do. We're going to be talking, of course, about Starmer because he's on the front pages still this morning. Kemi Badenoch calling for him to make an apology, not just to Rosie Duffield, not just to the rest of his party, but to all women in this country because basically this is a guy who until Wednesday was under the impression that women could have a penis, was under the impression that the law actually stated such a matter and that a trans woman could be, in fact, a woman. Now, because the lawyers and the Supreme Court judges have told him that's not true, he's very happy, he says, that they've clarified the position for him. Well, I think there will be plenty of women that you know and that I know who always knew they were women and who always knew that trans women were not women. They didn't actually need the Supreme Court to tell them. The question now is will Keir Starmer have the humility to admit that he got it wrong, that he got the law wrong as a lawyer, and that he should now apologise for the harm that he caused to women in this country who've had their rights sort of worn away by this crazy band of trans activists who are threatening to go more crazy coming up on this weekend and to make more threats and to hold up more banners calling for the death of J.K. Rowling, to call for more outdoor peeing events, which they seem to enjoy doing, and to call for more death to TERFs. They said the only good TERF is a dead TERF, and these, of course, are people who they regard as trans, exclusionary, revolutionary females, or feminists, I think. I mean, the whole story is absolutely and utterly mad. We're going to talk as well about what's on the front page of the Times this morning, in which it looks like a bit of a setback for Ed Miliband. Crazy Ed wanted to buy a load of solar panels from China, and now he's not going to be allowed to because it turns out they're being built by slave labour. We told him that. Another victory for the home of common sense. Also, the BBC gave Gary Lineker the red card and he's bleating on and on about it. Where else? On the BBC, of course. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Morning, Mike says Kish in Greater Manchester on St George's Day. Keir Starmer should reclaim what it is to be an English gentleman and knight of the realm, which is to act with honesty, integrity and respect. The only way he can do that after all the lies and betrayals propagated by him is to fall on his sword and resign. What a very good idea. Paul from Plymouth says, morning, Mike. Great interview with Debbie. That was Debbie Hayton we spoke to earlier. That must be the first trans person ever to actually have a civil two-way discussion and not just shout the interviewer down. Live your best life, Debbie, and keep up the great work. Mike, says Paul in Plymouth. Thank you very much indeed for that. And Stefan in Bromley. We all agree that the potholes need to be tackled. The best way is to relay the road. The problem will be 2 weeks after relaying a road, one of the utilities will dig it up. Yeah, there is that problem. Absolutely right. But we'll talk some more about potholes coming up in a little while. Let's talk to Esther McVeigh, who's here with us right now, former Minister for Common Sense, of course. Look at that flag now. It's fluttering really, really well in the breeze. Keir Starmer apparently has reclaimed, he says, the St George's flag. Well, he didn't need to reclaim the St George's flag. He just needed to start telling some of his inner circle and Labour MPs not to diss people who fly it. Morning.
Exactly right. When he said he's reclaiming the flag, I thought, from whom? Who is reclaiming the flag? It can only be the wobbly woke people of which he is in charge of that's all of a sudden having to reclaim it. Nobody else was. In fact, I did the event last year in number 10 to celebrate St. George's Day. So those of us who celebrate it and who are patriotic always have been. It's he who is now trying to be, and I'll put the emphasis on trying to be patriotic. He's not a leader, is he, Mike? He's not a leader at all. He sort of reads whatever script he is given that day by Morgan McSweeney, and he goes, today I must talk about being patriotic. Despite the fact what we're doing with veterans, so it's also gaslighting, so I'll talk about this, but actually I'm going to deliver this and I'm not patriotic at all.
No, because on the veterans front, according to the front page of the Times today, he's basically throwing them all under a bus. He's taking away the protection they had from being prosecuted because of things that might have happened 50 years ago in Northern Ireland, and he's going to make it possible for them to be dragged through the courts.
And these veterans are truly patriotic. These people are those who've laid their life on the line for this country. No, he speaks with forked tongue on pretty much everything. It reminds me of a robot, and each day we sort of reboot him, put in another chip with something else that he wants to talk about. I mean, yesterday it was the big U-turn on women. And what is a woman? It makes me smile, actually. How old is he? 62, 63, been married, got a couple of kids, but didn't know what a woman was until a court told him what a woman was. And then he sort of, again, regurgitated in one way or another. And I don't actually believe this. We'll have to wait to see really what he does, because it seems like he's not going to stop people in his own party who are trying to reverse this court decision. So he's not doing anything there. So let's see how this plays out. I think Kemi Badenoch was great yesterday on the floor of the House. Obviously, he didn't come to the floor of the House. He let Bridget Phillipson do it. I nearly said Phillipson then, didn't I, rather than Phillipson, because she's somebody else who all of a sudden has learned what a woman was overnight. So hopefully Kemi will skewer him at PMQs today.
Yes, we're all looking forward to that. But doesn't it show you the sort of mettle of the man and the character of the man, who doesn't even show up in Parliament? It took 6 days to mention anything at all since the judgment was handed down by the Supreme Court last Wednesday. I mean, I was calling for him to speak out last Wednesday. Daily Mail waited until Monday of this week to say, you know, it's been 5 days. If you've got anything to say, he was obviously trying to just, you know, sort of, you know, ride it out in the hopes that people would forget all the things that he'd said. But of course we've been replaying since last Wednesday all the things that he said, including that, you know, trans rights are human rights, you know, a trans woman is a woman. And then he said, this is 2023 I believe, that that's not just my opinion, that is the law. And he prides himself on being this great lawyer when he got the law wrong. So he needs to come out at least and admit that, but he hasn't even got the humility to admit that he got it wrong, and he hasn't even got the sort of the charm and the finesse to explain it properly. So he's upset everybody now, because now the trans lobby hate him as much as women used to, for being so wooded and ridiculous about it.
Whether he was trying to ride it out could have been, whether he was practicing his words in front of a mirror to see if he could say them as authentically as possible, I don't know. But whatever it was, it took a very long time to come to the public and admit he got it wrong. That makes me feel that he doesn't think that. Or maybe he thought, oh, we're doing equality, diversity and inclusion courses. We need to put on some biology courses for my cabinet. Maybe that's what he was trying to do, get some biology courses for his cabinet members. But like I said, I think this is a massive, significant U-turn. And it just shows that he's not a leader at all if you don't really understand those fundamentally basics. And sort of the apologies he's got to give to all those women who might have lost their job, being hounded out. Obviously, his own MP, who's now an independent, Rosie Duffield. There's a lot that they've got to do correct and get right.
Yeah, well, maybe he's waiting for the court to tell him it was a U-turn, because he doesn't think it is at the moment, because Bridget Phillips has said they've always protected single-sex spaces for women, and, we absolutely have always had this view, and it's not a new position. We've always been like this. It's absolute nonsense. Judge for yourself, you know, if he was practising in front of the mirror, I don't think he spent enough time doing it. Check this out. This is what he said yesterday.
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you don't believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. So I think it's important that we see the judgment for what it is. It's a welcome step forward. It's real clarity in an area where we did need clarity. I'm pleased it's come about. We need to move and make sure that we now ensure that all guidance is in the right place according to that judgment.
What are your words for the trans community who are worried about what this could mean for them?
Well, look, I think it is important that we have clarity about the law. That's what the Supreme Court is there for. So obviously that's an important and welcome step, and we go forward from there.
I'm sorry. It's just, you can't stop laughing now at this guy. You know, we go forward from there. In what way do you mean? Go forward to do what? Go forward to go to every woman that he said was only a woman, of 99% of a woman, because there was 1% of women who had a penis. I mean, it's just laughable how seriously he takes himself, isn't it?
Well, I was thinking he didn't really believe what he was saying there, because he just kept repeating, welcome the clarity and the judgment. Welcome judgment, clarity. I thought he nearly choked on the first time he said that, because obviously he doesn't welcome it.
No.
He never thought it himself, so he doesn't welcome it. And he didn't do what the Conservative Party was going to do, and Kemi Badenoch was going to do, which was actually bring it before Parliament and on the face of the law get it that the sex meant biological sex. So he did none of these things, so he doesn't welcome it. It's been forced upon him, yet another thing that has been forced upon him.
Right. And let's talk about fishing now as well, because this is the other big story which is kind of being swept a bit under the carpet at the moment. It's just on inside pages of newspapers. But, you know, he's in a position, we just spoke to a fisherman down on the south coast who's very worried that he's basically going to give away the store, that, you know, under the Tories, the rights to fish in our own waters and the rights to fish in the Channel had started to return. But it looks as though now Keir Starmer, in his haste to do some kind of deal with the EU, which may involve defence, may involve food standards, may involve, you know, net zero. He's basically going to sell off more fishing rights.
This is a major mistake, Mike. If you're really wanting to do trade deals around the world, you can't have it that we're aligned. And what they're looking for is dynamic alignment. That means if anything changes in the EU and you've signed up to it, it will be moving constantly. So you can't be doing trade deals anywhere. So I would say the other parties, the Conservative Party in particular, need to put a lot of pressure on here. And I would put the EU under notice, saying when the Conservative Party get back in, this will not be what we stand for. There will not be this dynamic alignment. We will not be selling our fisheries, fishermen, fisherwomen down the Swanee. But I would put the EU on notice straight away. This is just a Keir Starmer for the moment decision. This is not what the British public want or agreed with or fought for.
No, exactly right. And let's talk about the state of the economy while we're at it as well, because Rachel Reeves over in Washington over the next couple of days got a meeting, I think, with the IMF on Friday. She got more bad news yesterday from them, who basically downgraded our growth prospects to 1.1%, which you might as well say is pretty much flatlining at zero. And she's been told you can't blame Donald Trump for this. This is entirely down to your own sort of catastrophic budget.
Well, that's right. I mean, she was hoping to be able to blame it on somebody else. I think you'll find that now a bit of a trend with this Labour Party. Blame somebody else or welcome something else and do multiple U-turns. No, what the big disaster that she brought on was fundamentally that £40 billion taxation bill. That massive taxation bill, and most of it, £25 billion on the increase in employers' national insurance contribution. And businesses said straight away, how are we going to pay for that? And then there was two things, wasn't it? Well, what we're going to have to do is increase prices And if we increase prices, that will be inflationary. So you'll see that feeding through. Or the other thing, they said, well, we're going to have to put the brakes on here. We can't expand as a business. We'll have to look at our own workforce. What are we going to do there? Because there were so many things coming down the track, there was going to be cost implications. It wasn't just the taxation. It's this extra regulation. It's the workers' right. It was a whole host of things coming forward. And that fundamentally stopped businesses in their tracks. And I'm glad the IMF pointed that out, that it was domestic problems that she fundamentally had brought onto this country.
Exactly right. And I read a statistic, I think, yesterday, that this is the most number of closures of businesses that's taken place in this year alone, just so far, since 2010.
Yeah, that's right, since the financial crash back there. And who was in charge then? Labour. What we've always said, Labour in charge. They know nothing really about businesses. All they think businesses are there for is to give them more tax so that they can pursue their fantasy policies, net zero being one of them, of which they've handed over £8 billion to set up this new Quango, GB Energy. They're sending millions of pounds or billions of pounds more in foreign aid. No, businesses are there to support the country, bring wealth into the country, pay for public sector, keep people employed, and they don't understand that. Why? Because none of them have actually, pretty much none of them have worked in a business. None of them have set up a business.
Well, it's all they understand, isn't it? I mean, in the piece in The Sun today about the St George's Day sort of celebrations, he had I think he had some kind of a drinks reception at Downing Street where he invited the NHS, the police and charity workers. You know, all very well, but why doesn't he invite business into Downing Street? Why doesn't he get business and the view of business about how to make the economy work better and how to run the country? Because without business, he hasn't got any revenue. He's got no tax and he's got no money.
Yeah, so you need those people there. I would have thought some veterans might have been good to be there. Maybe people who've got MBEs, OBEs, people who've done things who significantly in their community, people who've added to the life of the UK. But yes, there should have been a different guest list there. He just wants to hang around with his cronies. I mean, you know, your Gary Linekers of this world in their little bubble, talking to each other. They'll all be waffling on about net zero, we'll be waffling on about EDI, maybe talking about what they're going to do in Birmingham with the bins, but doing nothing, just waffling on, and the rest of us are watching on in horror.
Oh yeah, apparently the talks are back on today because the Birmingham City Councillors and the bin men have all finished their extra long bank holiday weekend, which apparently finishes on Tuesday up there for them, not Monday like everybody else. But there we are. Esther, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Esther McVeigh, former Minister for Common Sense, of course. Plenty of common sense here on the home of common sense. Elle in Wales says, "Morning, Mike. There's nowhere for Starmer and his bunch of incompetents to go other than resign. They have done their best to destroy women's rights, treated us all with contempt. He won't apologise because his head is so far up his own backside he's forgotten that women are the largest vote in the country." And Chris says, "Morning, Mike. The reason nobody saw Starmer on holiday is because he was in a factory having his body rebooted as his computer brain was going wrong and the batteries were going flat, so he was plugged in for 6 days. Fixing the foundations. Clarity. It's very important to have clarity going forward. Because we need clarity going forward." He's talking about women, you know, human beings. You wouldn't know it, would you? 20 past 8.
Stonewall itself has to look very closely at the judgment and question its own policies. I mean, I was a great supporter of Stonewall back in the 80s when we were fighting Force 28, and it was a legitimate organisation. I do fear it's lost its way a bit since then.
So should the government stop giving my money to them?
Well, I think there needs to be. They need to look to themselves first of all.
Answer the question.
And then I think that if they carry on, there is a question then about whether public money goes to them or not. I think that's a reasonable question to ask in the light of the Supreme Court judgment last week.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 23 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham. Margaret says this, is Clarity a new member of the government? And we should also mention Shakespeare's birthday today. Happy St George's Day, Mike, says Margaret. Thank you very much indeed. Another great show, says Pam, in Sea View, showing a load of St George's flags. Those are very good. We might have to post some of those on Twitter for you. And Chirp says this from Huddersfield, I'm so relieved that today I've got clarity that my wife of 12 years is indeed a woman. Well done. Let's have a quick look at what Ed Davey thinks a woman is.
I think we need to manage this and think about it and debate it with a bit more maturity and a bit more compassion.
Well, that's what Sir Keir Starmer once said to me, and he never did answer the question, can a woman have a penis?
Well, I've just answered that question.
They can.
Listen, I've made it really clear that if people, the vast majority of people will have the same gender as their biological sex, but a small number won't.
So a woman can have a penis?
Well, quite clearly.
Quite clearly, according to him. Let's talk to Noah Hoffman. I've got a St George's Day voice note first. Sorry, Jim.
Morning, Mike. It's Jim from North London here. I just saw those lovely flags that are looking quite sad and limp on top of, I think it was Downing Street. So I was thinking, why don't we get one of those shouty, outraged trans people, well, men, to just sort of stand there and scream and shout towards the flags. That should get them moving. There's so much hot air that comes out of their gobs. I just need one or two. Yeah, it can have a little break, or not.
That would do the trick. Although, as I say, as if by magic, when I did say what they needed to get some wind going on down there, suddenly the flag started unfurling and blowing in the wind. It was lovely. Beautiful to see. Noah Hoffman's here, political correspondent of The Sun. Very good morning to you, Noah.
Morning.
Nice to see you. You must be really, really pleased that it's been clarified that you're a woman.
I mean, I had so many sleepless nights wondering what I was, but Keir Starmer has given me this clarity, and now I'm sleeping so well.
Yes, and going forward, it will be great for you. Got another great piece from Julie Bindel in the Sun today about the days of hate and the terrible, horrible signs that were being held up at the weekend by these trans activists who are now vowing to continue with these protests and make them even bigger and more nationwide and all the rest of it. And the question a lot of people are asking me on the show is, how come Keir Starmer hasn't addressed this at all? How come he hasn't sort of tried to quell a lot of the violent speech that's being spread around, a lot of the nasty banners that are being unfurled? And why indeed are some of these people who are threatening violence to the likes of J.K. Rowling still walking around?
Yeah, these are all great questions from your listeners. I think, okay, the fundamental answer to that is that Keir Starmer hates talking about this topic.
Yeah.
He only ever speaks about it when absolutely forced to. And in the past, even then, he's just avoided the question altogether, which is what led to Julie's column today, effectively saying you don't have principles, you're a hypocrite, you're only stating the obvious, stating absolute fact of biology when the Supreme Court has you know, in his mind, given him a green light to do so. So I think the reason that we're not seeing him come out really strongly against these protests with some really disgusting, violent, misogynistic placards is because he just wants to move on. He's said, okay, fine, I concede, a woman can't have a willy. I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah.
I think that is what we're seeing, and that's why he's not coming out stronger.
I mean, what happened to his safeguarding of women and girls? Because we've also seen over the past few days, certainly in Scotland anyway, some of these trans activists kind of lining the corridors on the route to, say, a public toilet, particularly a girls' public toilet or a women's public toilet, intimidating people who are going in and out.
Yeah, it's absolutely horrible. And I think even though we have some institutions who are now really starting to refine what their policies are towards something so basic as a toilet, there are still major questions left unanswered. And we see that manifested when you have ministers come on shows, radio shows in the morning, or when they're in the comments. A lot of them still aren't able to answer specifically what pub toilet should a trans person use, for instance? Yeah. And we're getting all these sort of fluffy answers. A lot of the ministers are saying, well, it's up to the individual organisation. And then when pushed a bit harder, they'll say, oh, well, they should use the toilet based on their biology. So it's still just not very clear. And I think until we get that clarity, and, you know, Keir Starmer is saying the clarity is there, so he needs to practice what he preaches. We might still see these sort of cues of intimidation.
Yeah, because the problem is he's now using the law to hide behind, as he did in some ways with the definition of terrorism in Southport, you know, where he said, oh, well, we couldn't identify a suspect as a terrorist because he didn't fit the legal definition of terrorism. And you go, well, that's just ridiculous and it's wrong, and you know it's wrong. And in the same way here, he doesn't want to actually utter the words, you know, a trans woman is not a woman, because he's worried about his base, and he's worried about all the people in the Labour Party who hate him for it.
Yeah, and those exact words you just mentioned, a trans woman is not a woman, we had to hear that through his official spokesperson rather than him himself, which is interesting. So it's being communicated through his advisors, but he's really clearly struggling to actually say it himself. And to your other point, Mike, I've lost track of the number of articles I've written for The Sun about another Keir Starmer U-turn. And I think there will become a point, in fact, for a lot of people, they're probably already there, where they just think, can I trust anything that the Prime Minister says? How do I not know he's going to backtrack on it a year later? Blow with the wind, go where it's popular. You know, a few years ago even, it was very, very unpopular to say a woman cannot have a penis. You would be cancelled on social media. You could be fired from your job. But now, you know, everyone's got back to their senses, and there's a general consensus that biology is real. And he's only moved when that major consensus, when the herd has moved along. So how can people trust him? That's a question they'll be asking.
Yeah, I think so. And it's also very clear that this is a very cynical government in the way that it tries to stage manage the news, you know, because there's now a lot of people in my sort of earshot, and certainly in my audience, who believe that he went on holiday because he knew that particular judgment was coming down the pipe, and it was quite handy for him not to be around. And his people, of course, are saying, well, he didn't comment about it because he was away. Well, he wasn't away for the whole time. He was back on Sunday. He went to a church. He was then making comments on Monday about various different things, about Easter. He was talking about, you know, free school breakfast clubs and all the rest of it. And then he went deliberately to the West Country, some people are saying, to get away from people like you in London, who would have asked him perhaps slightly harder questions, like, you know, did you get the law wrong when you said that it was the law that a trans woman is a woman?
Yeah, so I'll leave that judgment for your listeners to make, Mike. But they can sort of look at the facts on the ground and make that decision. But it was interesting that he took so long to come out and have a statement from him personally, rather than from his spokespeople. Again, what their sort of justification is that no, there's no conspiracy or there's no coincidence. He was on holiday. He deserves a break. And at the moment he was back in a working capacity, he made a comment. But it was interesting just how long that took to come versus other incidents where the comments have come a lot more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have trouble at Prime Minister's questions today, isn't he? Because as much as Kemi Badenoch's not always been a great performer on a Wednesday afternoon, I mean, she was great yesterday. And if she carries on in that vein today, he's not going to have many places to hide, is he?
I mean, whether you're left wing, right wing, however you identify on the ideological spectrum, there was no doubt that Kemi's performance in the Commons yesterday was quite a masterpiece. She gave an absolutely scathing speech listing all the points that Julie makes in her article. Now, let's see if she can repeat that today at PMQs. There's a lot more pressure because some of the public actually tune into PMQs, whereas it's only my fellow nerdy colleagues and I that will tune into a random Commons debate on a Tuesday. But if she can pull off what she did yesterday, then he's in for a very tough PMQs.
We should look forward to it. No, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Noah Hoffman there, political correspondent of The Sun. Big piece by Julie Bindel in The Sun today, page 10, Days of Hate. They've been like a condensation of the past 21 years, the violent rage of men claiming to be women, an indication that trans activists never expected anyone to dare stop them invading our spaces and stealing our rights. Very well said. Coming up, we're going to speak to Isabel Oakeshott. But how about this, a voice note? Oh, a bit of breaking news, by the way. The amount borrowed by the government was much higher than the £137.3 billion predicted by the UK's official forecaster, the Office for Budget Responsibility. The ONS said borrowing rose to £16.4 billion last month, the third highest amount for March since monthly records began. £16.4 billion in 1 month. What are they doing with it? Where's it all going? David Lammy can't be spending all of it on his private jets, can he? For heaven's sake. Let's get a voice note from Justin.
Morning, Mike. Disgruntled Justin from Halifax here. Just to give you some clarity on the motorway vehicles, they actually do quite a good job when there's accidents occurring or debris on the road or potholes that have made their way apart. They stop the traffic. It is quite a good system, and it certainly does work. So as much as I agree with absolutely everything that you say most days, yeah, they do a good job. But they definitely do like to think they're the old Bill, and they're actually not. Keep up the good work, my friend. I listen every day.
So what you say is, and thank you, Justin, for that, you're saying that these highway maintenance guys just drive around and around and around waiting for something to happen, which I suppose is fair enough. But, I mean, I'm not sure that they do a great job because, you know, sometimes they stop the traffic on motorways if there's been an accident and they hold it for a much longer time than I think is reasonably necessary. And they don't ever really give you any information as to how long they're going to do that for. But I guess there'll be people who come on and go, oh, you're such an idiot. You don't know that when there's an accident, you can't just have people driving bikes. Yes, I know all that. But, you know, anyway, we'll talk some more about highway maintenance. Isabel Oakeshott's coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Of course, we've got some borrowing figures out, and it's not good news, is it? More than £20 billion higher so far in the financial year ending March is the figure that we've spent in this country. And a rise in borrowing in March was 14.6 billion more than the Office for Budget Responsibility had predicted. It's not a bottomless pit, guys. You just can't keep going back to the well and borrowing more money. It doesn't work like that. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, though, who's here, because a quite remarkable video was released by Isabel last night. It was shown here on Talk, but we're going to show it again here, because this is a researcher doing some work, walking around, trying to figure out what's happening. I'll just talk over it. It's somewhere in central London. It appears to be under a flyover. Not entirely sure where. According to TfL, Transport for London, these people, these individuals who are clearly illegal migrants, you would imagine, have been offered accommodation, apparently, decent accommodation, courtesy of the taxpayer, but they preferred to stay on sort of sleeping rough in tents underneath this motorway. And they come towards the person with the camera filming them, throw stones at them, start swearing at them, and then finally come running after him, and he has to make a pretty sharpish escape in order to save his own skin. Pretty terrifying stuff, Isabel. Very good morning.
Morning. I mean, this is such shocking evidence of the kind of degradation of our streets and the kind of behaviour that Londoners and people in cities and towns up and down the UK seem expected just to put up with. These people, just to be clear, they are living under that bridge just off a roundabout in Paddington. That's central London. And Transport for London, that's responsible for the public land there, has spent the last 6 months trying to persuade them, you know, tea and sympathy and being nice, to move elsewhere. And they have been offered, according to the documents that Transport for London has submitted now in desperation to the courts, these people have been offered perfectly decent, safe accommodation somewhere much nicer than under that flyover. But no, they are actively choosing to remain where they are. Now, I don't think that would be okay, even if they were living peacefully and minding their own business. But as you can see from this report, that's not what they're doing. They are, frankly, terrorising the neighbourhood. And the reason that we went to investigate what was going on was because the local community is so fed up of them. Local shops claim, and I see no reason why they would make this up, that these youths are basically responsible for daily shoplifting raids on local businesses. And here they are demonstrating their attitude to law-abiding citizens in the neighbourhood by throwing stones at them when they come to have a look at what's going on, and then running in hot pursuit. And you can hear that they almost caused a car crash as they ran across that road. So, I mean, look, I don't think that taxpayers, decent people up and down the UK, should have to put up with our town centres being parts of our town centres turned into third world shanties. And I certainly don't think anyone should have to put up with being threatened or intimidated by people who, frankly, almost certainly have no right to be in this country at all. And they certainly breaking the law by being under that underpass.
I mean, they certainly look like very fit and healthy young men as well, who I'm hoping that you're going to tell me that the person with the camera managed to get away from them, because I think if he hadn't got away from them, he would have been quite severely injured, because they didn't look very happy with him, and they looked like they were well intent on giving him a doing, quite frankly. But this also, I think, is a microcosm of what I've been saying for a while, certainly down in parts of Sussex. I believe I've had several reports of people saying that you can be walking in the woods somewhere and suddenly you'll come across a couple of tents that have obviously not just been put there by people who are, you know, on holiday. These are people who are clearly living in the woods. And I would maintain these would be people who come off boats in the southeast of England on various different beaches, not Dover, not with border force of protection, but just land on a beach and wander off into the local sort of town and woodland.
Well, Mike, if you want to talk about migrants, illegal migrants living in woods, let's do that, because I've got a whole story on that, including some footage of a migrant that was indeed living in the woods on the outskirts of London. We had a long conversation with him and got his full story. I don't think this is okay for our once proud country. I don't anyone should be expected to put up with this. And I think that there should be a zero tolerance approach to illegal encampments, because that's what this is. And the lawsuit that Transport for London has now lodged will, of course, be at taxpayers' expense. Doubtless it'll take ages. I'm not sure why we need a lawsuit at all. It's addressed on the documents which we found lying on the road. The papers have been served on these individuals. It's addressed to persons unknown. Well, I think that tells us everything we need to know, doesn't it? What are they, persons unknown? How hard can it be? Maybe you actually need some body armor to approach these people if you're the police and say, right, who are you?
Right.
Can you please see your visa, your right to be here?
Yeah.
If you are entitled to be here, let me just tell you, this isn't how we live in our country, and there's some nice accommodation that the council can provide for you. But I don't think they do have a right to be here, which is why they're called persons unknown.
Right, and they should be rounded up in that case and put on the next plane back to wherever.
It's not complicated, this is it. And now the police have got evidence of them actually being violent towards innocent bystanders. Surely that's all that's needed to get something moving on this one.
Absolutely right. This from Max in Maida Vale. Sorry, it's not from Max, it's from somebody who doesn't give a name. It's under the Westway in Paddington, Little Venice, near my house, he says. It's terrifying. They've been there for ages. I've seen them having a flipping barbecue party. It's like Mad Max in Maida Vale. Incredible.
Yeah. There you go. And a lot of people have been responding on X, writing in that this is near where they live too. Well, yes, it is near where lots of people live because it's central London.
Yeah.
And it's just such a terrible look for our city. You know, billions of pounds have been put into the regeneration of that part of London. Bits of it are absolutely lovely now. And then you've got this kind of slum, which is totally unnecessary. And it's not the only one in London. There was a long battle to get rid of a slum of this sort in the middle of Mayfair.
Yes.
Another one outside the one of London's premier teaching hospitals, the UCH, which caused a right old fuss. And Camden Council actually did the right thing. They took a stand and actually physically removed the tents. And then there was a whole outcry from a bunch of lefties hand-wringing and saying how outrageous it was to bin the tents. And Camden Council, instead of doubling down, went all wishy-washy and issued a public apology and said that it wasn't acceptable that they removed the tents. Well, it was, and that's a policy that should be adopted.
Absolutely right. Well, great. Thank you very much for bringing us that. Isabel Oakeshott there, Talks International editor, with a remarkable video, quite a scary video, I think you'll find. These are the kind of people roaming the streets of London. Is it any wonder that the streets are not as safe as they once used to be? These people are criminals. They are with what can only be described as malevolent intent. And luckily, they didn't get hold of the person who was filming them as they threw stones at him, because if they had done, he would have probably been quite severely injured. Absolutely shocking state of affairs. Let's talk to Mark Lehane now, though, Executive Head Teacher at Wootton Academy Trust, because this week this was the big unveiling, wasn't it, by Keir Starmer, and let's have a look at him doing it, of the new breakfast clubs that the government think are going to solve the schools' truancies problem.
I think these breakfast clubs are fantastic. I'm a big fan of them. For children, it's really good for their development because they're an environment. You know, before school, they're mixing with other kids. Yes, it's sort of breakfast club. There's bits of learning and socialisation and skills which are really important, and you can see that happening.
So you've experienced that with your kids?
Yeah. And we put our kids in, and it was a great thing to do. I'm very worried at the evidence of disparity in sort of ability to learn when children get into the first year of primary or reception. Massive disparities, probably more than they've ever been. So breakfast clubs help to close that gap a little bit earlier.
They've also caused, of course, taxpayers to be spending yet more money because apparently, according to the Labour government, this is going to save taxpayers £460 a year. Not quite sure how they work that one out, because if you already feed your children before they go to school, how is giving them a free meal going to change that? Mark, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So, 2/3 of primary school head teachers say Labour's free breakfast clubs will have no impact on attendance. And presumably you're going to be giving free breakfast to people who don't necessarily need them.
Well, I mean, listen, when my kids were younger, we made use of the breakfast club that their primary school ran. We had to pay for that. And I think a lot of your listeners will be wondering why the government are proposing a universal offer that everyone can have for free, regardless of whether they can afford to pay or not. Because Personally, I think well-paid people like me, like teachers and other professionals, we're more than capable of paying for our own children to go to a breakfast club. And therefore, the money that's being spent on it to subsidise it for middle-class people like me could probably be better spent in other areas in education. And on top of that, something else that I know is concerning primary colleagues of mine is that the amount of money that the government are putting into this is very, very modest, and it's only 60p per child per day.
Right.
And so lots of primary schools are having to find money from other bits of their budget to subsidise these breakfast clubs. And right now it's just a pilot phase. It's only schools volunteering to run them to see how it goes.
Right.
But once the bill that's going through Parliament is passed, it will be a legal obligation for every primary school in the land to run a breakfast club, and potentially schools are going to have to find a lot more money to make that happen.
And this is at a time when schools are under quite a bit more pressure, presumably, budget-wise, because of the rising cost of electricity, for one thing, because of the rising national insurance and all that, and just the general sort of everyday rises of prices for everything that you buy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, money is tight in the public sector, but money's tight for everybody. So those of us that work in the public sector have to cut our cloth according to our means. So we've got to make the money go as far as we can. It's just little things like this on top soon add up. So it might be a few £1,000s here, a few £1,000s there. But if you're a small primary school, maybe a small rural primary school, where you won't have huge numbers of kids on roll already, this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Listen, there are very good intentions behind this. Some people think that running a breakfast club will be great for young children's development. Other people think it will help to raise attendance, which we know is really, really important. My concern is it's one of these things where we're going for a blanket approach, because actually most schools where there's been demand for this have been doing something like it for a long time already.
Yeah, quite. And so, again, you know, it's nice, and I'm sure it comes from good intentions and all of that, but, you know, you can't do everything. The Labour government seems to think that they could just keep borrowing. We just had figures saying they borrowed another sort of 16 billion pounds or more in the past month, and it's unsustainable. And they can't just keep coming up with schemes which give money away when they haven't got enough money to do the things that they're supposed to be doing before.
And of course, as soon as the government rolls out a new entitlement, it's very hard to take it back further down the line if they need to find savings elsewhere. Before I did my current job, I was lucky enough to work in government as a special advisor for a few years, and we know how hard it is, and I know this firsthand from working in government. Once you give people something for free, it's very hard to take it away if you need to put that money into something else. But on top of that, there's the practical things there. Again, imagine you're a primary school, you might only have 1 or 2 spaces big enough to run a breakfast club. That's probably your school hall. So you've got to run a breakfast club before school and then quickly turn things around before the school day proper starts and get that space ready for a PE lesson or an assembly or so on. So lots of the practicalities here are really difficult for schools, which is why I worry about making it compulsory, making it legal that every school has to do it.
That is the problem, isn't it? Mark, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Mark Lehane, Executive Head Teacher at Wootton Academy Trust. There's another bad idea from Starmer and his goons, isn't it? Lee from Hampshire says, I can't stand those highway maintenance guys. On Easter Monday, a lorry broke down. Of course, there is no hard shoulder on these smart motorways, so they had to escort the vehicle to the SOS area, but they kept 2 lanes shut, even though the vehicle was safely off the road. That's the problem. That's exactly the problem. Pat in Fife says, when there's an accident on the motorway, the police should put screens around it to stop motorists rubbernecking. That would speed up the traffic. Well, I think I've seen them do that in some cases. I think that there is something they can do. Coming up, we're going to talk some more about the borrowing figures. We'll talk some more about the OBR. We'll talk some more about the black hole that Rachel Reeves is creating. She's just added another £16 billion to it, so it gets bigger by the month. They only inherited a £22 billion black hole. Since December, they've borrowed about 5 times that. So what does that tell you? This is Talk.
Stonewall itself has to look very closely at the judgment and question its own policies. I mean, I was a great supporter of Stonewall back in the 80s when we were fighting Force 28, and it was a legitimate organisation. I do fear it's lost its way a bit since then.
So should the government stop giving my money to them?
Well, I think there needs to be. They need to look to themselves first of all.
Answer the question.
And then I think that if they carry on, there is a question then about whether public money goes to them or not. I think that's a reasonable question to ask in the light of the Supreme Court judgment last week.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:53, coming up to 9 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Greer will be here just before 10, of course. We've got much to do and much to talk about. Joanna from Salisbury says, Mike, free breakfast clubs, it's teaching children it's a way of life, so it will continue for generations. How about educating children about it's important it is to have breakfast before you come to school, make it part of the school code? Well, that would make more sense, wouldn't it? We're going to talk to Justin Urquhart-Stewart in a second. Let's have a quick look, though, first at what Angela Rayner said about the trans movement back in 2020 with Pink News.
It's not about what genitalia you have. You should be able to self-identify of who you are and be loved for who you are. So please don't ever let anyone put you in a box and tell you you're not good enough, because you're amazing. You'll always have an ally in me.
Yeah, well, you better not break the law, Angela, because, of course, it says you can't be a trans ally if you think a trans woman is a woman. Because that's not the law, is it, after all? Justin Urquhart-Stewart here. Pressure on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, from the IMF yesterday. Today, the Office for National Statistics have said that borrowing in the financial year ending in March was 151.9 billion, more than 20 billion higher than the previous financial year. Goodness gracious me, Justin, the credit card must be busted by now, mustn't it?
Oh, yes, I must welcome you to my large, ever-growing black hole, which was, as it was, about 22 billion. It's now probably doubled that. We have a serious problem here. Unfortunately, of course, what we're going to be seeing over the next few weeks is probably some excuses to what's happening, such as we can blame, President Trump, because what he's doing with tariffs and things like that, and what's happened there. And to an extent, in a few months' time, you probably will be able to blame some of that on him. But at the moment, it's quite clear what's happened. The cost of our debt has gone up. That's actually been happening around the world, most places. But also it goes up because why? People don't always trust, actually, the fact, actually, that in order to, you're going to be able to pay your debt back. Therefore, I want you to pay me more interest on that debt in order for me to buy it. Plus the fact, of course, the first thing we did, as we saw last year, is the cost of actually running this economy has gone up because of actually putting an extra cost on actually setting up a business, actually employing more people. It is absolutely ridiculous. What we need to do is that one vital word of confidence to actually say we get the economy growing, we actually invest in the economy, encourage people to invest in the economy. There is no shortage of money in this country. It's just that actually it's not actually being directed into those new businesses, which are there and ready to set up. But as you quite rightly have also said, the number of also businesses actually shutting at the moment is hardly surprising because the cost of actually employing people has gone up. That, I'm afraid, at a moment like this, is not a clever idea.
No, indeed. And are a lot of these borrowings being done by the government actually borrowing money to pay more debt off, as it were? You know, the 14.6 billion they borrowed in March comes after they borrowed, I think, 17 billion in December and similar figures in January and February. I mean, what are they actually doing with the money?
Well, every year we used to spend round about 50 billion a year, which is round about the same as our defence budget, just on the interest on our debt. This year, it'll probably be about 110 billion. 110 billion. That's a huge amount of money just going on that. So the answer is yes, more money is being borrowed because we're actually to have to pay more of that debt. So it is ridiculous. What you need to do, we go back to this issue again of actually learning to live within our means, to actually learn encouraging people to be investing if they're investing and spending. And a very simple thing you could do, which doesn't cost the government anything to do at all, provide more guarantees for companies to be set up. You only have to, government has to pay for that when they go bust. If they go bust, some will be very successful, and lo and behold, they pay more tax and the government gets more income. Not that difficult. And the other bit, of course, is, remember, most of our economy, and most of us watching and listening to you this morning, here we are trying to pay our mortgages or rent or whatever. If we actually move house or move flat, whatever happens like that, then we actually spend more money. So why don't you get rid of stamp duty on housing transactions, which doesn't earn a lot of money? Encourage people, allow people to move. Kitchen goes, bathroom goes, the dog goes. Well, you probably keep the dog. But what will end up happening, though, is actually spending more money on VAT, and that's more money going through. It's constructive growth in the economy, which will mean, therefore, you've got more money coming in. You don't have to borrow quite so much. And lo and behold, you heaven forfend, you even start paying debt down. And yes, we do that. Remember the days once in Mrs. Thatcher where actually we were paying debt down? There was a headline in the Daily Telegraph which said, is there going to be a gilt market in 20 years because we won't have any borrowings? Oh, well, those are the days.
I mean, if only some of these financial predictors could get something right. That would be a first, wouldn't it? That would be really good. And the OBR's got it wrong again, it would seem. But listen, great to see you. Justin Urquhart Stewart, thank you very much indeed. With a gloomy look at the outcome for the near foreseeable future. There's a piece in the I newspaper today saying that record numbers of people now are getting into the ISA market because the ISA interest rate has gone as high as 4.12%, the biggest monthly rise since October 2023. 3.5 billion has been invested into cash ISAs in February alone. That's 84% up compared to April so far last year, which is pretty extraordinary stuff. It's all money, money, money. Coming up, Richard Tice is going to be here. We'll get his view on the state of the economy. Richard Fuller, Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, is along as well. We'll keep your calls coming in on the trans business. We'll keep playing you clips of the Labour government and what Cabinet Ministers have said about the trans business before now, where, of course, they now say, well, we've always wanted to protect single-sex spaces. We've always thought that trans women were not women. Well, they just simply have not. It's just not true. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after the news.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yay!
8722, start your message with the word talk. Who would you send to space and why?
The person I would love to send to space would be Mr. Keir Starmer. And then I would tell the Galactic Empire that he was part of the Rebel Alliance and let them blow him away with the Death Star. No Brits was involved, no fingers could be pointed.
You carry on taking the medication, George. Yes, I'd send all the Labour government to space with a one-way ticket and throw in the SNP for being useless. They're all a bunch of... Oh, all right, fair enough.
One person, quite frankly, I think needs to go to space in a one-way journey is Jeremy Kyle. He goes on about his age one more time, how he's 60 this year, he was 59 last year, repetitively over the course of the weeks and months. We have to hear him, I'm 60 this year, I'm 60 this year.
Richard Tice, did you put that cheeky bugger up to that?
I'm hoping he's going to send me the invoice because that was absolutely brilliant.
Which MP would you send to space?
Although I'll get in terrible trouble if I answer that. But it's fair to say there's quite a long list.
The sad thing is about sending people into space on a one-way ticket is I don't think that we've built a spaceship big enough to take the lunatics off this planet. I mean, from the net zero loonies to the transgender loonies to the racists to the terrorists, there is just so much to the wokerati. We need some big spaceships.
Big spaceships.
Good evening. I never know how you're going to start this conversation, Jeremy.
Katy Perry went to space today, OK? Who would you send... I'd love her to say what I wanted to, but I'd never disrespect her. Who would you send to space who could never come back?
Well, I'd be happy to send Ed Miliband to space, I think.
Oh, that is an outrageous question, so I'm not even going to answer that question.
Sam Matterface, do you get the job, yeah? Go on.
No, Sam Matterface, I tell you what, There's no.
I think David Lammy would be the person I'd want to send up in space and never come back again.
Yeah, the problem is how much would the bill be for him to munch through whatever food on the way there?
Hey, it worked.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 9, the final hour of the show. It's Wednesday, of course, the 23rd of April. That means Prime Minister's Questions will be coming up at midday right here on Julie Hartley-Brewer's show. She's here just before 10 to tell us what's going on in her world. The Pope is lying in state currently at St. Peter's Basilica. His body was moved there this morning. We'll be bringing you news on that as and when it comes in. A lot of you are responding to that incredible footage that we saw with Isabel Oakeshott of some illegal migrants living under a flyover, basically in northwest London, a place called Maida Vale, which some of you will know very well and some of you won't. But I can tell you, we'll get the social media team to get the video out there. It is basically like the Wild West. It's like something to do with Mad Max. People living in tents, feral youth basically chasing people around, threatening them with violence, having barbecues in the public square. Just an extraordinary state of affairs for what used to be one of the great capital cities of this world, never mind Europe. What is going on in London? What has happened to London? Sadiq Khan is responsible for it. Keir Starmer is responsible for it. Let's face it, the Tories are responsible for it too, because more migrants came in under their watch than have come through so far under Starmer's. But I'm afraid that number is probably going to flip-flop like everything else that Starmer does, because there's more migrants now coming in illegally than ever before. And I'm convinced that there are plenty of places where they're staying out of touch and out of sight of the authorities, people who come here without even ever seeing anyone from Border Force. But we'll bring you all that coming up in the next hour of the show. Richard Tice is going to be here. We're going to go down to College Green to speak to Richard Fuller, who's Deputy Shadows Chief Secretary of the Treasury, I should say. We'll be talking about Keir Starmer. Kemi Badenoch says he needs to apologise, not just to Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP who was so unceremonially treated in her own party, and she's now an independent MP, but to all women. Because let's face it, this is the biggest flip-flop by Captain Flip-Flop that there's ever been. But he's got so much arrogance and such a lack of humility that he won't apologise and he won't say he got it completely and utterly wrong. 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, Ed Miliband has had a bit of a blow this morning. He's had to reverse his plan to flood the country with Chinese solar panels made by slaves because apparently it's unethical. Who knew that Ed Miliband had any ethics? Well, he doesn't. But he's been told you just can't do it because anything that we buy in from China will have to be guaranteed not to have been put together by slaves. Well, that pretty much what rules out buying anything from, doesn't it? 0344 499 1000. Also, what's going on at the BBC? They don't seem to think the trans story is a story worth covering. SAS veterans also being unjustly hounded by this Labour government over the troubles in Northern Ireland. I kid you not. 0344 499 1000. It's Morning Glory. Let's get it on. This from somebody who doesn't want to give a name, to Mike and Isabel. I live in Little Venice, a nice area next to this shanty town. Never mind the filthy mess and thieving, it's also the danger that they pose to women. My daughter was followed home the other night by one of these men, clearly with bad intent. She was absolutely terrified and managed to seek safety in a hotel with a concierge. This once relatively nice neighbourhood is terrifying at night, especially for women. It is also, of course, St George's Day today. There's a flag flying from the roof of Downing Street. We showed it earlier. When we first started looking at it, it was incredibly limp and nothing was going on. We managed to infuse it with some air and it was unfurling and blowing in the wind nicely. Susan in Southport says, Mike, happy St George's Day to everyone at Talk. I'm just displaying England flags around my front garden. I'll let you know if I get arrested. Well, according to Keir Starmer, he wants to reclaim the flag from those who would wish to divide our society. I don't know who he means by that. Maureen says all this nonsense about breakfast clubs. Back in the 1970s, we didn't have 2 cars, nor all the modern equipment for housework, nor Just Eat and all those other delivery companies. We had to cook all our meals from scratch. Breakfast provided before we set out. We worked a full day from 9 to 5, no home working. Entitled, lazy people today, they have no idea what a full day's work is. Absolutely right. Well, the Sun actually did a survey the other day saying that those people who are working from home are not just working from home, they're having a lot more sex at home as well for some reason. Nobody knows why. Let's get a voice note from Nick on Labour.
Now, I listen to your show nearly every day, and you've kept me and countless thousands sane over the last few years. But every day I think, oh, blimey, we must have reached peak incredulity. And then the next day, we surpass yesterday's incredulity with another peak of incredulity. It's remarkable. And never in my life, and I'm a pensioner, Mike, have I witnessed or experienced such an incompetent bunch of clowns running the government.
I'm absolutely in total agreement with you, Nick. I have never seen anything like it. I mean, we've said this often on this show. Yes, we thought the Labour government that came in would not necessarily be one that we agreed with. We didn't think necessarily that that we here at Talk would see things that they saw and think they were good. But we didn't have any idea just how incompetent they have in fact become. Let's talk to Richard Fuller, MP, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He's down in Westminster for us on College Green. Richard, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Graham.
Nice to see you. I mean, I think our last voice note there spoke for all of us. You know, nobody can quite believe the incompetence. I don't think anyone can remember such an incompetent government.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And even today, we had news about public borrowing massively overshooting the forecasts that were just made last month by the OBR. And we have a Chancellor who seems to be addicted to borrowing, addicted to debt, and addicted to raising taxation. All of the things that she didn't say in the election. And unfortunately, we're now lumbered with her.
Well, indeed. And this idea that, you know, they were always in favour of single-sex spaces, they were always, you know, the defenders of women. You know, they're just making it up as they go along now, aren't they?
I think you're right. And but there's a deeper political issue here, which is about the willingness of politicians to speak clearly and to say exactly what they think, the truth that's in their heart. If you look at this issue, right from the start, there have been some people, the women from Scotland who took the case to the Supreme Court, the author J.K. Rowling and Kemi Badenoch, who've been clear right from the start that they understood that in this conflict of rights, it was right to stand up for the rights of women, right to stand up and defend women-only spaces. But there were a lot of politicians who couldn't even answer the basic questions on this. And that unfortunately includes the Prime Minister. So when Kemi Badenoch says that she's looking for the Prime Minister to make an apology, I think beneath that is what she's really saying is, Prime Minister, you need to explain what your thinking was and whether or not it's changed because you're a lawyer or it's changed because you now truly have a different point of view, because the Prime Minister is the one who now has the responsibility to make sure that government in all its aspects is following the Supreme Court ruling, sensitive, yes, to the issues that trans people feel, but making sure that we defend the rights of women to have access to women-only spaces.
I've got a little clip here that I'd like to play you. This is Robert Jenrick. It's apparently been leaked to Sky News, just been brought to my attention. Don't know whether you've heard it before, but he's vowing to bring this coalition together, his words, not mine, to ensure that Conservatives and Reform UK are no longer fighting each other for votes by the time of the next election. Have a listen to this.
Nonetheless, they continue to do well with tolls. And my worry is that they become a kind of permanent or semi-permanent fixture on the British bureaucracy. And if that is the case, as I say, I have tried to do everything I can to stop that being the case, then life becomes a lot harder for us, because the right is not united. And then you head towards a general election where the nightmare scenario is that Keir Starmer sailed in through the middle as a result of the two parties being disunited again. I don't know about you, I'm not prepared for that to happen. I want right to be united. And so one way or another, I'm determined to do that, to bring this coalition
together and make sure we...
It's not that clear exactly what the context is of that, but he would appear to be saying, as far as I can make out, Richard, that the danger of what might happen in the future is that Reform and the Conservatives split the vote on the right, and Labour continue in power.
Yeah, so the context is important, Ms. Graham, and before that, what Robert had said was that he's fully engaged to put Reform out of business, because unless there is united opposition behind the Conservative Party to Sir Keir Starmer, we will end up with a risk that you get another Labour government, a radical Labour government by default. And so it is important, as Robert Jenrick said, that all of our efforts, the Conservative Party, are to put forward a Conservative platform that unites the right.
But the polls would suggest that it's the Reform Party that's going to put the Conservatives out of business, perhaps.
Well, I think... So with opinion polls at this stage, you've got people want to protest. It's been a year since we had a very difficult election result for the Conservative Party. It's very difficult in that first 12 months to suddenly turn around and say, well, now I'm going to vote Conservative again. People want to see that the Conservative Party has learnt its lessons, and under the new leadership of Kemi Badenoch, we're very serious about demonstrating that we're a united party, that we've learnt the mistakes from the mistakes of the past, and that we're going to put together a platform of Conservative policies that can unite the vast majority of this country that have Conservative values. In the interim, people look at this government, and as you said earlier on, about the very poor way that they're handling the country, their economy, the economy, and are protesting. But that's different from actually governing. And we have elections coming up in a month's time, on May the 1st, for local councils. And it's not Reform that has the record of delivering good service at lower cost for residents. It's Conservative councillors. And the lesson is, don't risk your council tax going up, your services going down, by splitting a vote and not voting Conservative. Continue to support those policies, turn and join the Conservative Party, and give your vote to the Conservatives to protect your local services and protect your local council tax.
Richard Fuller, thank you very much indeed. Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Tory MP, of course, as well. Well, as luck would have it, we've got a man who can answer all of those charges. Richard Tice is here, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Richard, I'm not sure your namesake, Richard Fuller, is entirely cognizant of the facts of the matter here. I don't think it's the Tories that are going to put Reform out of business. It's more likely to be the other way around, isn't it, as I said to him?
Well, look, competition's a good thing, and the Tories have had their chance. They had 14 years to turn the country around and make it grow again and great again, and they did the opposite. And so people won't forgive and they won't forget. That's why we're surging in the polls. That's why we are in almost every poll now ahead of the Tories, very often by more than the margin of error. And so we will just keep doing what we seem to be doing pretty well. And obviously we're looking forward to the results coming through on May the 2nd from all the various elections. And I think generally we've got a track record of calling it out better. For example, the figures this morning out, the government borrowing figures, I was the only person straight after the spring statement just 4 weeks ago today who bounced onto, I think I did 14 media interviews, and I said that the OBR's numbers were delusional on both growth and debt and borrowing. And here we are, 4 weeks later, I've been proven 100% correct. In fact, the figures are even worse than my worst nightmare. The government has borrowed some 14 billion, between 14 and 15 billion pounds more than the OBR forecast just 4 weeks ago for the year to March. In March alone, to put it in context, per household, the government has borrowed about £300 of your money per household. In 1 year per household, it's about £3,000 of extra debt that they've stuck on the mortgage that you may have on your house, or that they've borrowed on the value of your house, to spend it on higher pay rises for the public sector, for lower productivity, so spending on sending money overseas on foreign aid or things like giving away the Chagos Islands, and waste. Wherever you look, there is just vast amounts of waste. These borrowing numbers are catastrophic. And it shows not only that the OBR is incompetent, clueless, and woeful, but more significantly, that government spending is completely out of control, and we are heading towards a debt crisis in the United Kingdom during this parliamentary term. People need to wake up.
Well, the IMF, who are not always that reliable with their predictions either, have suggested that the growth in this country will drop to 1.1%, which is already another downgrade for Rachel Reeves, who's gone to Washington cap in hand to try and get something that she can bring back that will be good news for the economy. But there's nothing really on the horizon for that. And it seems that a lot of this money they are borrowing, they're actually using to pay off previous debt as well.
Well, it's all one huge, great just sink of incompetent, very often wasteful spending. I mean, whether it's the £100 million on a back shed or vast amounts of other absurd spending, or just caving into the unions at every turn. We know that this government will continue to waste our cash, and I'm desperately, desperately worried. I think that you've got the madness of all the sort of gender ideology that both main parties failed on, but also you've got this, we have a looming cash crisis. We cannot keep spending more than we're earning and think it's going to end well. You've had 3 downgrades now. The OBR halved their growth forecast. The IMF's now reduced their growth forecast. The Bank of England reduced it to about, I think, 0.7. We'll be lucky this 12 months, this calendar year, we'll be lucky if we get anything above 0, frankly. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
The direction of travel is absolutely dire.
And, I mean, 2 things exercising my audience this morning, Richard. Obviously, the continuing hypocrisy of Labour over the trans rights issue. You know, Labour pretending that they were in favour of protecting women and single-sex spaces all along, when in fact they weren't. You know, Keir Starmer, incapable of actually making a statement of his own. He has to put Bridget Phillipson in place to do it for him. But the other one is, on the front of the Times this morning, 100 Special Forces veterans face being unjustly hounded because this government is going to remove the protection they had from fighting during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and they could all now be dragged through the courts in various different ways. Absolutely shambolic, and on St George's Day to make this news available to the media is just astonishing.
It is astonishing, but I think we now know where this government's priorities lies. They're more concerned about advisory rulings from dodgy lawyers on international courts than they are in actually standing up and protecting and defending our brave veterans. It's basically as simple as that. And they're more in hock to absurd trans activists calling for people to be hung or killed than they are for our brave servicemen and women who've served this country. And yeah, it's truly shocking on any day of the week, frankly, but least of all on St George's Day. And you sort of think, why are they picking fights at every level, whether it's with pensioners over the winter fuel allowance or whether it's with veterans over this the legacy troubles and things? It's just completely unnecessary. Just focus on growing the economy and making people better off, and then everything else broadly will sort itself out. People want small government. They want government to get out of the way so that people can get on and lead their lives. And we carry on down this path, what I call the Red Ed Miliband path of doom because of net stupid zero, then we're heading towards bankruptcy. It is as simple as that. We cannot continue on this absurd path towards impoverishment.
Well, you must be encouraged to see also on the front page of the Times that Mad Ed and his mad plan for doom and gloom has been given a bit of a setback this morning, because apparently GB Energy is going to face legislation that will force it to ensure that slavery and human trafficking are not taking place in its supply chain, which very much rules out most of the solar panel businesses that they were going to buy from in China.
Completely. And it's astonishing because I was in the debate in the chamber a few weeks back when this was raised, and they said, oh, well, it's more important to pursue our net zero goals. I mean, the reality is, I put some solar panels on roofs. That's the only place you should be putting them, not on productive agricultural farmland. And I had to work really hard to find solar panels that hadn't been built, hadn't been manufactured in China. I mean, there's a few, but essentially they've cornered the whole market because guess what? They're producing these solar panels using cheap energy, cheap electricity from coal-fired power stations, as it is when they manufacture wind turbines, using steel produced from blast furnaces using coal. I mean, the hypocrisy and absurdity of all of this is truly, truly breathtaking. So we end up with the highest energy and electricity prices in the developed world, which makes all of our industry completely uncompetitive. So hey presto, our steel, our automotive, our chemicals, and our oil and gas industries go down the Swanee, down the tubes. That's where everything is going, unless we change course.
Yeah, or off a cliff, as I prefer. But you're absolutely right. Richard, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Let's get a quick voice note from Gina.
Good morning, Mike. I'm a bit furious. I've just listened to your last interview. The Conservative MP says they should learn from their mistakes. Clearly they're not. Do they not believe how people feel? They just don't seem to ever learn anything. What is wrong with these people?
It's a very good question. What is wrong with these people? It's a question we ask every single day on this show. Here's Angela Rayner talking last year about what she thinks a woman is.
I think, you know, we do have to set out what the equalities legislation says. I think it's pretty clear. I think we can, you know, we can look at the Gender Recognition Act, we can look at self-identification that protects the rights of people that do want to transition, but also, you know, prevents the fears that I think is out there, fears that I don't think is justified. And I think if we're able to have that debate in a constructive way, actually we'll be able to come to the consensus. Transgender women's rights are women's rights.
So transgender women's rights are women's rights. Pretty clear to Angela. What do we need so much clarity for from Sir Keir Starmer? He should have just asked her, couldn't he? She could have spread it out for him, as it were. 9:23.
Stonewall itself has to look very closely at the judgment and question its own policies. I mean, I was a great supporter of Stonewall back in the 80s when we were fighting Force 28, and it was a legitimate organisation. I do fear it's lost its way a bit since then.
So should the government stop giving my money to them?
Well, I think there needs to be. They need to look to themselves first of all.
Answer the question.
And then I think that if they carry on, there is a question then about whether public money goes to them or not. I think that's a reasonable question to ask in the light of the Supreme Court judgment last week.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:27. I'm Mike Graham, and of course it is St George's Day. Listening to that Conservative MP Richard Fuller, says Dave in South Gloucestershire, they need some clarity too. After 14 years of broken promises, division and failure, the voters are not going to trust them through a series of promises. We've been there so many times with the Conservative and now Labour government, and we have had enough. Says Dave. Morning, Mike. This is a day for Kemi Badenoch to slay the dragon at PMQs. This is a big chance, and his incompetent cronies. Love your show. Graham from rat-infested Birmingham. Yeah, apparently rat-infested Birmingham, they're going to have some more talks today to try and get rid of the infestation. Who knows if it will have any luck, if they'll have any luck. Let's talk to Rafe Heidel-Mancu, though, historian, broadcaster, senior fellow, of course, at the New Culture Forum. It happens to be Shakespeare's birthday as well. Keir Starmer has claimed today, Rafe, and a very good morning, happy St George's Day to you, that he wants to reclaim the St George's flag. He's even flying one from Downing Street. Whatever does he mean?
Yeah, good. Well, happy St George's Day to you too. Yeah, this is completely faux patriotism from Starmer and Labour. Nobody falls for any of this nonsense. We know that the left absolutely hate nationalism. They hate the nation states. They're internationalists. Many of Starmer's MPs don't even believe in borders. I mean, what we really know is, of course, Labour were hammered in previous elections because they were deemed to be unpatriotic. So we get these sort of cringeworthy statements that you're referring to, the silly event he had at 10 Downing Street where he's cosplaying as some sort of patriot. Yeah. But, of course, they're running scared of Nigel Farage and Reform, where, of course, many of the old school Labour voters, traditional anti-woke patriotic voters, have gone. But, yeah, you're right here. Look, let's be clear. The English flag does not need to be reclaimed from anybody.
Right.
Starmer has created a complete straw man here. What he's actually saying, or what he's implying, I should say, is that the English flag is mostly associated with the far right and with racists, and that's absolutely insulting.
Yeah. It's also not true, by the way. I mean, I'm getting lots of people sending me lovely pictures of their St George's flag, proudly displayed outside their homes in various different ways. And these are not people who are far right. These are not people who are racist. These are people who are simply proud to be English.
Yeah, look, I've said many times, the English are the only people on this island whose patriotism is always derided and denigrated by people in power. When the Scots and the Welsh quite rightly wave their flags with great gusto, it's called progressive nationalism. Yes. When the English do it, it's racist. Well, I'm sorry, that's hugely offensive. You've got all those nice pictures you've seen. There is nothing that is more serene and quintessentially English than the flag of St George flying above some ancient church in a beautiful English churchyard somewhere, or on an English green, during a cricket match. And to associate it with the Southport protest, as he did in Downing Street yesterday, is disgraceful. I mean, you didn't even get Joe Biden or Kamala Harris doing that after January the 6th, when you have protesters with the American flag going into the Capitol building. They didn't say, we need to reclaim the stars and stripes. But what's happened, of course, is that the left and the Labour Party have been embarrassed by English patriotism for decades. They sneer at it, they look down upon it, and anyone who waves it is either common, or they're racist, or they're some sort of weird, eccentric little Englander. Just remember, of course, Lady Nugent, Emily Thornberry's famous tweet of an English working man's house covered in English flags.
I know, and she absolutely mocked it and derided it and was most disrespectful, not only to the flag, but also to him. But also, doesn't this tell you where the Labour Party are coming from? Because at this Downing Street event where he talked about reclaiming the flag, he hosted it for NHS staff, police workers and charity workers. And I mean, it's as though they live in this kind of altered state of reality where they think that these are the people that build Britain. The NHS didn't build Britain, despite what the opening ceremony at the Olympic Games might have told you. It's a failed system that doesn't work. Most people who use it are very dissatisfied with it. The trust in it has disappeared, and yet, Keir Starmer wants to still get out on the steps of Downing Street and clap people who work in it. The police basically have lost the confidence of most of the people of this country because of the woke nonsense that their superiors tell them to do, where they send 10 people round to knock on your door because you've been either flying the St George's flag or you've been complaining about trans women. You know, and as for charity workers, well, you know, I'm sorry, they don't give the British economy any sort of plus marks whatsoever.
Yeah, we always do this. Whenever our authorities celebrate England, it's always the public services, it's the NHS, it's the police, who are now, of course, have the least trust and respect they've ever had from the British or the English people. And you're quite right, you know, when you mentioned the Olympic Games. One of the great gifts England gave the world is modern sport. No country created or codified more sports than England. And yet at the opening ceremonies, none of that was mentioned. We got kids bouncing on NHS beds.
Yes.
You know, if you go to the New Culture Forum channel, they just published last night a speech of mine where I gave the 10 ways that England made the modern world. No country had a greater impact on the world. That's what Keir Starmer should be focusing on. You know, the Americans never take any problem saying we're the world's greatest nation.
Yeah.
Well, England actually has had a bigger impact than anybody else. That's a cause for celebration, you know, from the English language, the common law, Parliament, the British Empire. There's so much that we've given the world. The Industrial Revolution, that's what we should be focusing on, celebrating our pride, celebrating our heritage, instead of this constant adulation of public services, which obviously are in decline and are symbolic of modern Britain rather than the pride of old Britain.
Yes, exactly. It's sort of, you know, it's the best of British, as they always say. Well, if that's the best of British, then I'm very sorry if that's as good as we can do. But listen, enjoy the day. Thank you very much indeed. Rafe Heidelmain-Koo, historian, broadcaster, senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, telling us that we've got much to be proud of here in Britain. And in England in particular, England has given more to the world than probably most other countries in existence. And I would actually say Britain in that as well, because of course Scotland was very much a part of all of that. And the whole of the Great British Isles back in the day was very much front and centre of revolutionising pretty much everything that we now do. But of course Labour are riddled with people who don't like the sound of that, because it sounds a bit jingoistic. Sounds a bit like you don't like other countries. No. The difference between pride in your own country and hating other countries is vast. It's like as big as the Grand Canyon. It's as big as the gap between America and Britain, as large as the distance between the two nations on the Atlantic Ocean. You don't have to hate other countries to love your own. Labour seems to have a problem with that. Let's have Melissa on the trans ruling.
Morning, Mike. Melissa from Cambridge. Just want to say hilarious, funny and very informative show this morning. I just wanted to make a quick point, if that was okay, about Keir Starmer, our lovely Prime Minister. He wants to go down in history as being one of the most brilliant leaders of all time, but actually all he's going to be known for is actually having the Supreme Court tell him what a woman is. So in history, they're all going to laugh about him because he was head of the CPS and he needed the Supreme Court to actually tell him what a woman is. How ridiculous. Anyway, have a good day.
Melissa, thank you very much indeed. It really is ridiculous, isn't it? For him to make out that this is some kind of, you know, moment of clarity, you know, a moment of sort of, you know, I don't know, Damascene conversion. I've seen the light. I couldn't see it before because the Supreme Court didn't tell me what I was supposed to be looking for. That rhymes, maybe. Put some music. Jane says, this country is a laughingstock the world over. We need a Supreme Court to work out genders, giving illegals 5-star accommodation, food, clothes and entertainment. Now having to feed breakfast to children. If you cannot feed them breakfast, don't have them. Very right. Trevor says this from Harrow. Good morning, Mike. Those using the Breakfast Club are most likely on benefits, so haven't they already been given money to feed their children? That's a good point. And Doug says, Mike, do parents of children who attend the breakfast clubs have to answer 260 questions, just like the pensioners did to claim the winter fuel allowance? Well, that is good. We'll come back to you with Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. They've got a new rule in the police. Apparently, if you fail the vetting check to get into the police, you'll be kicked out. Surely if you fail the vetting check, you shouldn't get in the first place. What's going on with that? And also, we'll ask him about the incredible footage underneath Westway over in Maida Vale in West London that Isabel Oakeshott supplied to us this morning. And we'll find out from him how much of this is going on around Britain's capital. This is Morning Glory.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here in about 20 minutes' time. And so we'll get from her what's coming up in her show from 10 until 1. What will be part of it, of course, though, will be Prime Minister's Questions, where hopefully Kemi Badenoch will completely eviscerate Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, by simply asking him if he can identify what a woman is, and whether, in fact, he now admits that he made a mistake when he misinterpreted the law back 2 or 3 years ago, when he thought that trans women were, in fact, women. Breaking news for Rachel Reeves, more bad news for her. The ONS, that's the Office for National Statistics, said borrowing in the financial year ending in March was £151.9 billion, which is £20 billion higher than in the previous financial year. So the black hole that she says she inherited is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, thanks to all the borrowing being done by the Tories. For heaven's sake. I was born in London, says Brad, and lived much of my life there. I absolutely loathe the place now. It's like a country within a country, a dirty, crime-ridden hellhole. Brad, who now lives in Cambridge. Well, let's talk to Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, very good morning to you. We're going to talk a little bit
Mike,
about...
happy St George's Day.
Yeah, and a happy St George's Day to you. We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about the police and how they've changed the vetting business that they do on prospective members of the constabularies up and down the country. But I just wanted to ask you, I don't know if you had a chance to see that video we played out earlier of these migrants who appear to be living underneath Westway, which is a well-known sort of road that goes over Maida Vale. They appear to be living there in tents. The people that are living near them have said to us that, you know, they're there all the time. They've been there for for ages. They have barbecues. They menace young women if they're walking around that particular area. They appear to be left alone. The council have apparently tried to house them. They don't want housing. What are you going to do with that? And is it something that's happening a lot now?
Well, I saw similar footage around Hyde Park and all, city areas. This is not unusual. You see campsites sort of set up on the embankments in London. It's just, and as you say, these people really don't want housing or whatever. They're happy to have set up these communes. And we always seem to follow the states. And if you look at cities like San Francisco in the United States and California, it is an absolute mess. It is utterly crime-ridden. A foolish left-wing government has allowed crime to flourish, to decriminalise things like shoplifting. And all these things do, Mike, is drag the country down. You know, that comment you had from a guy who lived in London, when people return to London, like I do as a police officer there for 3 decades, all you see is change around you, and none of that change is good. Yeah. It's decaying, crime is everywhere. And the trouble is with society, I always say this, if people think working for a living and paying for things in a shop is a stupid idea because everybody else is getting away with not doing those things, then society starts to break down, and it's just a mess. We have no control who's coming on it in this country, and seemingly we have no control on what they do when they get here.
That's the problem, isn't it? And you're right, because people were saying that there's an awful lot of shoplifting in the area, mostly carried out by these characters who do it sort of on a daily basis without fear or favour. And obviously they're quite young, fit men. They're quite dangerous looking. They're not very frightened of anybody, it would seem. I don't know what the police involvement is likely to be in a situation like that, but I mean, if the council have offered them housing and haven't been able to get them to take it, have the police not got the ability to go and just arrest them and say, well, if you can identify who you are, that would be good, but if you can't, I'm afraid we're going to take you in?
Well, there's no crime of being anonymous, really. So what the police could do, of course, is target them for committing crime, like the shoplifting. Right. You know, these people they won't be doing one, Mike. They'll be doing 10 a day. Yeah. You know, these people will be stealing high-value things like meat, alcohol, and the like. They need to be working with local shopkeepers, using the CCTV to identify them, not for one crime. The trick is to get them for 10 crimes. Because you get them for 10 crimes, they're more likely to get locked up. But these things need to be broken up. The council need to look at the bylaws. What are the bylaws about using that area as a sort of tented city? Right. There's probably some bylaws which prevent that. But what it means is the council, the police, all have to work together to come up with a plan, rather than sort of having half a go themselves and achieving not much really.
Exactly right. So there's no crime of sort of vagrancy or you know, putting up a tent in an area which is not residential or something like that.
A lot of these crimes came from after the Napoleonic Wars, the Vagrancy Act of 1824, and a lot of these were repealed. For all good reason, really. We don't want to vilify people for being what we used to call a tramp and things like that. But the trouble is, they've got rid of these laws, and then the problem just brings itself back. And as I say, the key thing is all those agencies working together to close this down and being ready one day to move in. Move them out, evict them, and get rid of all those tents and put them somewhere. Say, well, you've been offered fair accommodation here. But what it does is, as I said, it drags down the area. It sends a message, and the people who are the most vulnerable to this, Mike, is women and girls, because a lot of these characters come from countries where the attitude to women is very, very poor. They're fourth-class citizens. And this is where the danger comes of sexual and indecent assaults.
Yes, and that is another thing that you would expect the government to clamp down on. They talk a lot about, you know, wanting to protect women and girls, wanting to safeguard them all the time, and yet just literally, you know, a stone's throw away from a road that goes right down towards Parliament, they don't want to stop it happening.
Well, what's the problem there? You see, you've got two left-wing ideologies clashing. Because what you've got is, it makes common sense, doesn't it? We should protect women and girls. That really does. But then they've got the real fear that we might upset immigrants and say something that's against their culture. And so these two things just cannot compute with these MPs. And so this is why you get these awful mess in society where things are not dealt with properly.
Yeah, it is shocking. Let's talk a little bit about the Home Office and the new background inspection business coming up from May the 14th. It says here, police who fail vetting checks will be booted out of the police automatically from next month. Now, this is vetting once they're in the police rather than before they join?
Absolutely. So you're vetted before you... Wait, the trouble with a lot of this is people weren't vetted, as we saw with Wayne Couzens. When he transferred from one police force to another, it wasn't done. And this was strictly tied up after the Wayne Couzens dreadful man who should be hanged, in my view. But it's when people are in the police and then they fail vetting. And there's a recent case was brought up, and I knew the officer engaged. He actually worked for me for a while. What the thing is that this man has never been found guilty of anything. Right. And what they're saying is basically there's no smoke without fire, so you're going to be dismissed. Now, in some cases, you can look at an officer and think that they are really dreadful. There's something highly suspicious here. Right. And Sir Robert Mark said a good police force is one that catches more crooks than it employs. Yes. So there's always going to be bad apples. My concern is, Mike, is if I was an organised crime gang and I wanted to get rid of a good officer who was going to catch me, I would I would pay people to make all sorts of allegations. So my question is, how are we going to make sure that officers are not targeted by false allegations? Because bearing in mind, it's all right, people are found guilty, but it's when people make several allegations which are never proved, and then they can say, well, those 7 things come together. And my final thoughts on this is, I will agree to it if the MPs will submit themselves to the same vetting, and they can't be an MP if they fail vetting as well. Yes, I think that would be sensible. That would probably keep quite a lot of the MPs out of Parliament as well, I could imagine, given some of the things that we don't even know that go on. But, I mean, will this make the police better run? Will it make the police a better and more reliable force? What you've only got, you've got less than, I think, in the Metropolitan Police, which is 30,000 officers. You're talking about 40 officers. So getting rid of that, if there are 40 bad apples and they got rid of, and they are very, very bad and it's proved, then that's a good thing for the public. But it's not going to make a massive difference, to you as a viewer or a listener when your house is burgled or somebody's attacked or your property is stolen. And this is really where the police need to focus. The police need to get to this back to basics thing where they're focusing on those things that impact on us all. As we discussed in the previous part of the discussion, getting rid of people who are a commune which is really built on theft and stealing and possibly targeting women. These are the areas that the police need to focus on. But everything is that these things are all a distraction which drag senior officers away from focusing on burglary, robbers and thieves.
Absolutely right. Good to talk to you. Mike Neville, thanks very much indeed. Retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector there with his take on what's going on there on the mean streets of Britain. And there's plenty going on, I can tell you. Bob in Chiswick says this morning, Mike, have you noticed Starmer keeps sending women out to drop the dead donkey on us yesterday? Phillipson on trans, before Easter, Jess Phillips on the pedo inquiry, Mrs Balls on smashing the gangs and far-right rioters, Reeves on winter fuels, Starmer's an outright coward, hiding behind women, letting them do his dirty work. It's a very interesting point. And, of course, Rosie Duffield famously said that she thinks Keir Starmer has a problem with women. She's still waiting for an apology from him. She doesn't expect to get one, according to a piece she's written in the Daily Mail. Dave in South Gloucestershire says Starmer wants clarity on everything, apparently, and before he actually makes his mind up, he flip-flops, wavering in whichever direction of things may improve his popularity. The Supreme Court gave him that on what a woman actually is. Who's going to give him clarity on China, a hostile state trying to take over our country, and get him to stop his cabinet ministers sucking up to the communists like Reeves, Miliband and Reynolds? Well, a very good point. Let's get a voice note from Carl.
Morning, Mike. It's Carl in Manchester. Excellent show as per. Happy St. George's Day, everybody. Ed Miliband, that guy absolutely grates me inside. I think the solution is strap him to one of those blades of one of the biggest wind turbines for a couple of days and watch him rotate till he changes his mind on all this net zero nonsense. Anyway, just a thought. Bye.
Carl, thank you very much indeed. A very happy St George's Day to you. Max says, Mike, once again, this is on the free breakfasts. Once again, more free stuff, hoping to bribe the electorate. Too much government interference yet again. I don't want to pay for other people's kids, ever. Well, Mark, I'm afraid you probably will get a lot of people agreeing with you there, but you sort of do pay for them because you pay taxes. And some of that tax money ends up going to the schools, and some of that tax money ends up going to nurseries and, you know, all sorts of programmes for children. So you're probably already doing it, I'm sorry to tell you. This is, of course, the home of common sense. It's Morning Glory, 10 minutes to 10.
A lot of institutions, including really regrettably trade unions who have allied themselves to this cause and who were out on these protests this weekend. So the UCU, the University and College Union's head, Joe Grady, actually tweeted a picture from the protest saying, "Hate never wins." And, you know, very unfortunately for her, featured in one of the pictures she tweeted was a picture of a gallows and the words, "The only good turf is a dead turf."
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:53. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. About another 6 minutes or so. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here, of course. John in Bakewell says this. Mike, did you know this? According to church rules, any Saints' Day falling in Holy or Easter week moves to the week after the Easter fortnight, usually to the first Monday, which means St George's Day has been transferred from today, Wednesday, April 23rd, to next Monday, April the 28th. Well, it's St George's Day today, though, which means that it's not St George's Day next Monday. Can't be on 2 days, can it? St George's Day Mark II. Well, we're all celebrating it today, and mind you, I'm not going to say Keir Starmer thinks it's St George's Day. He must be right. He's not right about much, is he? Now, of course, we did speak earlier about the state of play regarding Keir Starmer. We've got Prime Minister's questions coming up, at which it will be another opportunity for Kemi Badenoch to have a massive go at the Prime Minister of this country and to quiz him on what he thought was wrong about when he was wrong about trans women being women, because he said they were. And not only did he say they were, he said it was the law, when it clearly wasn't. We spoke to Debbie Hayton earlier, who's the author of Transsexual Apostate, My Journey Back to Reality. Here's what she makes of it all.
Even after 6 days, Starmer hasn't been able to come up with a clear answer. No. Yesterday he was asked, do you believe that trans women are women? And he told everybody what the Supreme Court thought, not what he thought. Right. And that marks him out as different to what Kemi Badenoch's been saying, because she's quite clear about what she thinks. Yeah, and isn't it a bit disingenuous of Bridget Phillipson and all other Labour cabinet members to try to make out that they've always protected single-sex spaces for women? They've always stood up for that, which they haven't. The fact that they've always thought that, you know, biological women were women, and that they've always thought that trans women were not women. Well, quite to the contrary, that's exactly what they haven't believed. Well, yes, they're changing the tune and then trying to hide it. People have said, will we ever get an apology from these people? But I suspect what we're seeing is that they'll claim they've believed this all along, which is just not true. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, all of these horrible sort of disputes that have been going on, people claiming that they're going to try and find exemptions, people claiming that... Do you think that's all going to disappear? And the demos are going to disappear, or is this going to be something that sort of drags on like a bit of a sore? Well, I hope these demos disappear, because they're not doing the rights of trans people any good at all. They seem to be drawing in any anarchist, anybody with a grievance, to fight for a cause where they think they can't be challenged and haven't been challenged up until now. Yeah. And as far as your own personal experience goes, Debbie, what's your view of the way that the nation and the public treats trans people? Well, nobody really cares. Away from social media, in real life, people are more bothered about whether I do my job properly, whether I turn up for my duties and play my part in society. That's what people care about, and that's what the law protects. The law protects the rights, my rights not to be treated any less favourably than anybody else, and I wish Starmer would say that rather than just talk about clarity. Yeah. It's not clear what he's been clear about, what he's claiming clarity about. No, he loves to hide behind a sort of legal framework, doesn't he? Which is why I'm making much of the fact that he got it wrong under the law, because he's always telling us what a great lawyer he is. He's always telling us that, you know, he lives by the law. Well, the law is clear, Mike. The problem had been that the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act are unclear, and they don't really sit well besides each other. Right. The Equality Act, for example, doesn't define the word sex, but the Supreme Court was able to go back to the Sex Discrimination Act of 1975, which does define sex. And surely, as a lawyer, Starmer should have been able to see that for himself. Yeah, but of course he wasn't able to, because he didn't want to, because he's been captured by all of the fanatics and the activists in his own party. And that's why I think he's been so circumspect about saying anything that he might later regret. And that's why he won't admit that he got it wrong, and that's why he won't apologise, I suspect. Yeah, I suspect the question we'll never really know is, did Starmer believe all this guff all along, or was he running scared from a mob that he was frightened of? Yeah, well, I think we know the answer to that. This from Elsa, who says, can we trust Starmer? Of course not. I've reached the conclusion his opinions change minute by minute. In fact, he has no opinions. He just says whatever the person interviewing him wants to hear. Happy St George's Day to everyone at Talk from Italy. Very nice. And David in South Wales, morning, Mike. I don't believe Starmer has actually given a clear identification of what a real woman is. A woman is a biological born female, not just an adult female. These politicians make me sick.
Well, I can't argue with that, really. Julie Hartley-Brewis here. Very good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I think PMQs is going to be quite lively today.
Could
Usually,
be.
we're actually going to take it live today.
Yes.
We don't normally, because normally, frankly, it can be a bit of a bore-a-thon.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kemi Badenoch was on fire on that. And that's the thing. We were told, it was Dowding Street spokesman who said, oh, no, Keir Starmer no longer believes that trans woman is a woman. Now, him giving the definition of what a woman is not the same as his saying, yeah, I do not believe that a man who identifies as a woman is actually a woman, whether he's got a certificate or not.
Right.
That is the crucial thing. He won't say it.
He won't.
I genuinely don't know whether he believes what he said all this time or he was just pretending to believe it or not. Either way, you're either an idiot, insane, or a liar. Those three things are not, I think, good things for a Prime Minister to be.
And also for him to make out that he's such a clever lawyer, for him to say, define, when he said...
That was the law.
Well, it was the law. He said, not only is it, in my opinion, it is the law. Well, he was wrong about it, because it wasn't the law, was it?
It turns out not that great a lawyer.
So not that great a lawyer either.
It is extraordinary. What do you think of the flag? St George's flag, they're going to take it